The bulky man was turning into the grand corridor when Han finally caught up with him, his expression that of a man in a hurry and in a rotten mood besides. But that was okay. Han wasn't in all that great a mood either. "Colonel Bremen," he said, falling in step beside the man just as he passed the first of the slender purple and green chala trees that lined both sides of the grand corridor. "I want to talk to you a minute." Bremen threw him an irritated glance. "If it's about Mara Jade Solo, I don't want to hear it. She's still under house arrest," Han said anyway. "I want to know why." "Gee, well, maybe it has something to do with that Imperial attack 2 nights ago," Bremen said sarcastically. "You suppose? Could be," Han agreed, batting at one of the chala branches that was stretching a little too far from the trunk. The subtle turmoil of colour taking place beneath the tree's transparent outer bark exploded into an angry red at the spot where the branch connected to it, the colour shooting around the trunk in ripples as it slowly faded. "I guess it all depends on how much we're listening to Imperial rumour these days." Bremen stopped short and spun to face him. "Look, Solo, what do you want from me?" he snapped. A new flush of pale red rippled across the chala tree Han had touched, and across the corridor a group of diplomats sitting around a conversation ring looked up questioningly. "Look at the facts a minute, huh? Jade knew about the secret back door in the passages. She admits that outright. She was there on the scene before any alert was sounded. She admits that too." "Well, so are Lando and General Bel Iblis," Han said, feeling that thin plating of diplomacy that Leia had worked so hard to build starting to fail. "You haven't got them locked up." "The situations are hardly similar, are they?" Bremen shot back. "Calrissian and Bel Iblis have histories of the New Republic and people here who vouch for them. Jade has neither. Leia and I vouch for her," Han told him, trying hard to ignore that whole thing about her wanting to kill Luke. "Isn't that good enough? Or are you just mad at her for doing her job for you?" It was the wrong thing to say. Bremen turned nearly as red as the chala tree had, his face hardening to something you could use for hull metal. "So she helped shoot some alleged Imperial agents," he said frostily. "That proves absolutely nothing. With a Grand Admiral pulling the strings out there, the entire raid could have been nothing more than an elaborate scheme to convince us she's on our side. Well, I'm sorry, but we're not buying today. She gets the full treatment: record search, background search, acquaintance correlation, and a couple of question-and-answer sessions of our interrogators." "Terrific," Han snorted. "If she's not on our side now, that'll put her there for sure." Bremen drew himself up to his full height. "We're not doing this to be popular, Solo. We're doing this to protect New Republic lives. Yours and your children's among them, if you recall. I presume Councillor Organa Solo will be at Mon Mothma's briefing. If she has any complaints or suggestions, she can present them there. Till then, I don't want to hear anything about Jade from anyone, especially you. Is that clear, Captain Solo?" Han sighed. "Yeah, sure." "Good." Spinning around again, Bremen continued on his way down the corridor. Han watched him go, glowering at his back. "You do have a way with people, don't you?" a familiar voice said wryly from beside him. Han turned in mild surprise. "Luke, when did you get back?" "About 10 minutes ago," Luke told him, nodding down the corridor. "I called your room and Winter told me you two had headed down here for a special meeting. I was hoping to catch you before you went in." "I'm not invited, actually," Han said, throwing one last glare at Bremen's retreating back. "And Leia stopped by Mara's room first." "Ah, Mara." Han looked back at his friend. "She was here when we needed her," he reminded the younger man. Luke grimaced. "And I wasn't." "That wasn't what I meant," Han protested. "I know," Luke assured him, "but I still should have been here." "Well," Han shrugged, not really sure what to say, "you can't always be here to protect her." "That's what she's got me for." Luke threw him a wry smile. "Right. I must have forgotten." Han looked over his shoulder. Other diplomats and council aides were starting to show up, but no Leia yet. "Come on, she must have gotten hung up somewhere. We can meet her halfway. I'm surprised you're letting her walk around the palace alone," Luke commented as they headed back along the row of chala trees. "She's not exactly alone," Han said dryly. "Chewie hasn't let her out of his sight since the attack. The big fuzzball even sleeps outside our door at night. Must give you a safe feeling. Yeah, the kids will probably grow up allergic to Wookiee hair." He glanced over at Luke. "Where were you anyway? Your last message said you'd be back 3 days ago. That was before I got stuck on..." Luke broke off, eyeing the people beginning to wander through the corridor. "I'll tell you later," he amended. "Winter said that Mara was under house arrest?" "Yeah, and it looks like she's going to stay there," Han growled. "At least we can convince the bit pushers down in security that she's clear." "Yes," Luke said hesitantly. "Well, that might not be as easy as it sounds." Han frowned. "Why not?" Luke seemed to brace himself. "Because she spent most of the war years as a personal assistant to the Emperor." Han stared at him. "I hope you're kidding." "I'm not," Luke said, shaking his head. "He had her going all over the Empire doing jobs for him. They called her the Emperor's Hand, which is what that Imperial major down in the medical wing had called her." "That's great," he told Luke, turning to face forward again. "Just great." "You could have told us." "I didn't think it was important," Luke said. "She's not with the Empire now, that's for sure." He threw Han a significant glance. "And I suppose most of us have things in our background we wouldn't want people talking about. Somehow I don't think Bremen and his security hotshots are going to see it that way, Han said grimly. Well, we'll just have to convince them. He broke off. What is it? Han asked. I don't know, Luke said slowly. I just felt a disturbance in the Force. Something cold settled into the pit of Han's stomach. What kind of disturbance? He asked. You mean like danger? No, Luke said, his forehead wrinkled with concentration. More like surprise, or shock. He looked at Han, and I'm not sure, but I think it was coming from Leia. Han's hand dropped to the grip of his blaster, his eyes flicking around the corridor. Leia was up there with her former Imperial agent, and she was surprised enough for Luke to pick up on it. You think we should run? He said quietly. No, Luke said. His hand, Han noted, was fingering his lightsaber, but we can walk fast. From outside the door came the muffled voice of the G2RD guard droid, and with a tired sigh, Mara shut down her datapad and tossed it on the desk in front of her. Eventually, she assumed, security would get tired of these polite little sweetness-coded interrogation sessions, but if they were, it wasn't showing yet. Reaching out with the Force, she tried to identify her visitor, hoping at least that it wasn't that Bremen character again. It wasn't, and she had just enough time to get over her surprise before the door opened and Leia Organa Solo walked in. Hello, Mara. Organa Solo nodded in greeting. Behind her, the guard droid closed the door, giving Mara a brief glimpse of an obviously unhappy Wookiee. I just stopped in to see how you were doing. I'm just terrific, Mara growled. Still not sure whether getting Organa Solo instead of Bremen was a step up or a step down. What was all that about outside? Leia shook her head and Mara caught a flicker of the other woman's annoyance. Somebody in security apparently decided you shouldn't have more than one guest at a time unless it was one of them. Chewie had to stay outside and he wasn't very happy about it. I take it he doesn't trust me. Don't take it personally, Leia assured her. Wookiees take these life debts of theirs very seriously, you know. He's still pretty upset that he nearly lost all of us to that kidnap squad. Actually, at this point he probably trusts you more than he trusts anyone else in the palace. I'm glad someone does, Mara said, hearing the bitterness in her voice. Maybe I should ask him to have a little talk with Colonel Bremen. Organa Solo sighed. I'm sorry about this, Mara. We've got a meeting downstairs in a few minutes, and I'm going to try again to get you released. But I don't think Mon Mothma and Akbar will okay it until security finishes their check. When they found out that she really had been the Emperor's hand, I should have kept pushing Winter to get me a ship out of here. If you had, the twins and I would be in Imperial hands now, Organa Solo said quietly, on our way to be the prizes of his Jedi Master Sabaoth. Mara felt her jaw tighten. Offhand, she couldn't think of many fates more horrible than that one. You've already thanked me, she muttered. Let's just say you owe me one and leave it at that, okay? Organa Solo smiled slightly. I think we owe you a lot more than just one, she said. Mara looked her straight in the eye. Remember that when I kill your brother. Organa Solo didn't flinch. You still think you want to kill him? I don't want to discuss it, Mara told her, getting up from her chair and stalking over to the window. I'm doing fine. You're going to try to get me out, and we're all glad I saved you from Sabaoth. Was there anything else? She could feel Organa Solo's eyes studying her. Not really, the other said. I just wanted to ask why you did it. Mara stared out the window, feeling an uncomfortable swelling of emotion washing up against the heavy armor plate she'd worked so hard to build up around herself. I don't know, she said, vaguely surprised that she was even admitting it. I've had 2 days of solitary to think it over, and I still don't know. Maybe, she shrugged. I guess it was just something about Thrawn trying to steal your children. For a minute, Organa Solo was silent. Where did you come from, Mara? She asked at last. Before the Emperor brought you to Coruscant. Mara fought back. I don't know. I remember the first time I met the Emperor, and the ride here in his private ship, but I don't have any memories of where I started from. Do you remember how old you were? Mara shook her head. Not really. I was old enough to talk to him and understand that I would be leaving home and going with him, but I can't pin it down any closer than that. How about your parents? Do you remember them? Only a little, Mara said. Not much more than shadows, she hesitated. I have a feeling, though, that they didn't want me to go. I doubt the Emperor gave them any choice in the matter, Organa Solo said, her voice suddenly gentle. What about you, Mara? Did you have any choice? Mara smiled tightly through a sudden inexplicable welling up of tears. So that's where you're going with this. You think I risked my life for your twins because I got taken from my home the same way? Were you? No, Mara said flatly, turning back to face her. It wasn't like that. I just didn't want Sabaoth getting his crazy grip on them. Just leave it at that. All right, Organa Solo said, in a voice that said she only half believed it. But if you ever want to talk more about it, I know where to find you, Mara finished for her. She still didn't believe she was telling Organa Solo all this. But deep down she had to admit that it felt strangely good to talk about it. Maybe she was getting soft. And you can call me any time, Organa Solo smiled as she stood up. I'd better get downstairs to the briefing, see what Thrawn's fighting clones are up to today. Mara frowned. What fighting clones? It was Organa Solo's turn to frown. You don't know? Know what? The Empire's found some Sparty cloning cylinders somewhere. have been turning out huge numbers of clones to fight against us. Mara stared at her, an icy chill running through her. Clones? No one told me, she whispered. I'm sorry, Organosolo said. I thought everyone knew. It was the main topic of conversation in the palace for nearly a month. I was in the medical wing, Mara said mechanically. Clones, with the Katana fleet ships to fight them, and with the cold-blooded genius of Grand Admiral Thrawn to command them, it would be the Clone Wars all over again. That's right, I'd forgotten, Organosolo acknowledged. There was so much else going on. She was looking oddly at Mara. Are you all right? I'm fine, Mara said, her voice sounding distant in her ears as the memories flashed across her mind like heat lightning. A forest, a mountain, a hidden and very private warehouse of the Emperor's personal treasures, and a vast chamber full of cloning tanks. All right, Organosolo said, clearly not convinced but equally unwilling to press the point. Well, I'll see you later. She reached again for the door handle. Wait! Organosolo turned back. Yes? Mara took a deep breath. The very existence of the place had been a sacred trust, known to only a handful of people. The Emperor had made that clear time and time again, but for Thrawn to have a renewable army of clones to throw against the galaxy. I think I know where Thrawn's Sparty cylinders are. Even with her rudimentary sensing ability, she could feel the wave of shock that rippled outward from Organosolo. Where? She asked, her voice tightly controlled. The Emperor had a private storehouse, Mara said, the words coming out with difficulty. His wizened face seemed to hover before her, those yellow eyes gazing at her in silent and bitter accusation. It was beneath a mountain on a world he called Wayland. I don't know if it even had an official name. It was where he kept all of his private mementos and souvenirs and odd bits of technology he thought might be useful someday. One of the artificial caverns held a complete cloning facility he'd apparently appropriated from one of the clone masters. How complete was it? Very, Mara said with a shiver. It had a full nutrient delivery system in place, plus a flash teaching setup for personality imprinting and tech training on the clones while they developed. How many cylinders were there? Mara shook her head. I don't know for sure. It was arranged in concentric tiers, sort of like a sport arena, and it filled the whole cavern. Were there 1,000 cylinders? Organosolo persisted. 2,000? 10? I'd say at least 20,000, Mara told her. Maybe more. 20,000, Organosolo said, her face carved from ice. And you can turn out a clone from each one every 20 days. Mara stared at her. 20 days? She echoed. That's impossible. I know. Thrawn's doing it anyway. Do you know Wayland's coordinates? Mara shook her head. I was only there once, and the Emperor flew the ship himself, but I know I could find it if I had access to charts in a nav computer. Organosolo nodded slowly, her sense giving Mara the impression of wind racing through a ravine. I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, her eyes focused abruptly on Mara's face. You want to tell anyone what you've just told me. Anyone. Thrawn is still getting information out of the palace, and this is well worth killing for. Mara nodded. I understand, she said. Suddenly the room was feeling chillier. All right, I'll try to get some extra security up here, if I can do it without drawing unwelcome attention. She paused, cocking her head slightly to the side as if listening. I'd better go. Han and Luke are coming, and this isn't the right place for a council of war. Sure, Mara said, turning away from her to face the window. The lot was cast, and she had now irrevocably put herself on the side of the New Republic, on the side of Luke Skywalker, the man she had to kill. They held the Council of War that night in Leia's office, the one place they knew for certain that the mysterious Delta Source had so far had no access to. Luke glanced around the room as he came in, thinking back again to the tangled series of events that had brought these people, these friends, into his life. Han and Leia, sitting together on the couch, sharing a brief moment of quietness together before the realities of a galaxy at war were intruded once more. Chewbacca, sitting between them and the door, his bowcaster resting ready on his shaggy knees, determined not to fail again in the self-imposed duties of his life debt. Lando, scowling at Leia's computer terminal and a list of what looked like some kind of current market prices displayed there. 3PO and R2, conversing off in a corner, probably catching each other up on recent news and whatever passed for gossip among droids. And Winter, sitting unobtrusively in another corner, tending to the sleeping twins. His friends. His family. Well, Han asked. I did a complete circle around the office area, Luke told him. No beings or droids anywhere nearby. How about here? I had Lieutenant Page come in personally and do a counterintelligence sweep, Leia said. No one's come in since then. Everything should be secure. Great, Han said. Now can we find out what this is all about? Yes, Leia said. Luke sensed his sister brace herself. Mara thinks she knows where the Empire's cloning facility is. Han sat up a little straighter, threw a quick look at Lando. Where? On a planet the Emperor called Wayland, Leia said. A code name, apparently. It's not on any list I can find. What was it? One of the old Clone Master facilities? Luke asked. Mara said it was the Emperor's storehouse, Leia said. I got the impression that it was a sort of combination trophy room and equipment dump. A private rat's nest, Han said. Sounds like him. Where is it? She doesn't have the coordinates, Leia said. She was only there once, but she thinks she can find it again. Why hasn't she said something about it before now? Lando asked. Leia shrugged. Apparently she didn't know about the clones until I said something. She was undergoing neural regeneration, remember, when everyone here was discussing it. It's still hard to believe she could just miss the whole thing, Lando objected. Hard, but not impossible, Leia said. None of the general distribution reports she had access to have ever mentioned the clones, and she hasn't exactly been what you'd call sociable around the palace. The timing here is still pretty convenient, Lando pointed out. One might even say suspiciously convenient. Here she was, with practically free run of the palace, then she gets fingered by an Imperial commando leader and locked up, and suddenly she's dangling Wayland in front of us and wanting us to break her out. Who said anything about breaking her out? Leia asked, looking slightly aghast at the whole idea. Isn't that what she's offering? Lando asked. To take us to Wayland if we get her out? She's not asking anything, Leia protested. And all I'm offering is to smuggle a nav computer into her to get Wayland's location. Afraid that won't do it, sweetheart. Han shook his head. The coordinates would be a start, but a planet's a pretty big place to hide a storehouse in. Especially one the Emperor didn't want found, Luke agreed. Lando's right. We'll have to take her with us. Han and Lando turned to stare at him, and even Leia looked taken aback. You don't mean you're buying this whole thing, Lando said. I don't think we have any choice, Luke said. The longer we delay, the more clones the Empire's going to have to throw at us. What about the backtrack you started? Leia suggested. The one through Poderus and Oris sector. That'll take time, Luke said. This will get us there a lot faster. If she's telling the truth, Lando countered darkly. If she isn't, you're off on a dead-end chase. Or worse, Han added. Thrawn's already tried once to get you and that Sabaoth character together. This could be another trap. Luke looked at each of them in turn, wishing he knew how to explain it. Somewhere deep within him he knew that this was the right thing to do, that this was where his path was leading him. As it had been with that final confrontation of Vader and the Emperor, somehow his destiny and Mara's were joined together at this place in time. It's not a trap, he said at last. At least not on Mara's part. I agree, Leia said quietly, and I think you're right. We'll have to take her with us. Han shifted in his seat to stare at his wife, shot a frown at Luke, looked back at Leia. Let me guess, he growled. This is one of those crazy Jedi things, right? Partly, Leia conceded, but it's mostly just simple tactical logic. I don't think Thrawn would have tried so hard to convince us that Mara was a party to that kidnapping attempt unless he wanted us to disbelieve anything she might have told us about Wayland. If you assume that, you also have to assume Thrawn figured the attempt would fail, Lando pointed out. I assume Thrawn prepares for all contingencies, Leia said, a muscle tightened in her cheek. And as you said, Han, there's also some Jedi insight involved here. I touched Mara's mind twice during that attack. Once when she woke me up, then again when she came in behind the commandos. She looked at Luke, and in her sense he could see that she knew about Mara's vow to kill him. Mara doesn't like us very much, she said aloud, but on some level I don't think that matters. She understands what a new round of Clone Wars would do to the galaxy, and she doesn't want that. If she's willing to take me to Wayland, I'm going, Luke added firmly. I'm not asking any of you to go along. All I want is your help getting Mon Mothma to release her, he hesitated, and your blessing. For a long moment the room was silent. Han stared at the floor, his forehead creased with concentration, gripping Leia's hand tightly in both of his. Lando stroked at his mustache, saying nothing. Chewbacca fingered his bowcaster, rumbling softly under his breath. In the opposite corner, R2 was chirping away thoughtfully to himself. One of the twins, Jason, Luke decided, moaned a little in his sleep, and Winter reached over to rub his back soothingly. We can't talk to Mon Mothma about it, Han said at last. She'll go through channels, and by the time anyone's ready to do anything, half the palace will know about it. If Thrawn wants to shut Mara up for good, he'll have all the time he needs to do it. What's the alternative? Leia asked, her eyes suddenly cautious. What Lando already said, Han told her bluntly. We break her out. Leia threw a startled look at Luke. Han, we can't do that. Sure we can, Han assured her. Chewie and me had to pop a guy out of an Imperial hotbox once, and it worked just fine. Chewbacca growled. It did too, Han protested, looking over at him. It wasn't our fault they picked him up again a week later. That's not what I meant, Leia said, her voice pained. You're talking about a highly legal action, bordering on treason. Han patted her knee. The whole rebellion was a highly legal action bordering on treason, sweetheart, he reminded her. When the rules don't work, you break 'em. Leia took a deep breath, let it out slowly. You're right, she admitted at last. You're right. When do we do it? We, that is. You don't do it, Han told her. It's going to be Luke and me. You and Chewie are staying here where it's safe. Chewbacca started to rumble something, broke off in mid-sentence. Leia looked at the Wookiee, at Luke. You don't need to come, Han, Luke said, reading in his sister the fears he knew she couldn't voice. Mara and I can do it alone. What, two of you are going to take out a whole cloning complex by yourselves? Han snorted. We don't have much choice, Luke said. As long as Delta Source is active, there aren't too many other people we know we can trust. and the ones we can, like Rogue Squadron, are on active defense duty. He waved a hand to encompass the room. We're pretty much it. So we're it, Han said. We'll still have a lot better chance with 3 than with 2. Luke looked at Leia. Her eyes were haunted with fear for her husband's safety, but in her sense she could find only a reluctant acceptance of Han's decision. She understood the critical importance of this mission, and she was far too experienced a warrior not to recognize that Han's offer made sense. Or perhaps, like Han, she didn't want Luke going off alone with the woman who wanted to kill him. "All right, Han," he said. "Sure, we'll make it a party of 3. Might as well make it a party of 4, Lando sighed. The way things are going with my Nomad City petition, doesn't look like I'm going to have much else to do. It'd be nice to pay them back a little for that." "Sounds good to me, pal," Han nodded. "Welcome aboard." He turned to Chewbacca. "Okay, Chewie, now what's your problem?" Luke looked at Chewbacca in surprise. He hadn't noticed any problem there, but now that he was paying attention, he could indeed sense the turmoil in the Wookiee's emotions. "What is it, Chewie?" For a moment, the other just rumbled under his breath. Then, with obvious reluctance, he told them. "Well, we'd like to have you along, too," Han told him, "but someone's got to stay here and take care of Leia. Unless you think Palace Security's up to the job." Chewbacca growled a succinct opinion of Palace Security. "Right," Han agreed. "That's why you're staying." Luke looked at Leia. She was looking at him too, and he could tell that she also recognized the dilemma. Chewbacca's original life debt was to Han, and it pained him terribly to let Han go into this kind of danger without him. But Leia and the twins are also under the Wookiee's protection, and it would be equally unthinkable for him to leave them unguarded in the palace. And then, even as he tried to think of a solution, Luke saw his sister's eyes light up. "I have an idea," she said carefully. They all listened to it, and to Han's obviously stunned surprise, Chewbacca agreed at once. "You're kidding," Han said. "This is a joke, right?" "Yeah, it's a joke. Because if you think I'm going to leave Leia and the twins, it's the only way, Han," Leia said quietly. "Chewie's going to be miserable any other way." "Chewie's been miserable before," Han shot back. "He'll get over it. Come on, Luke, tell her." Luke shook his head. "Sorry, Han. I happen to think it's a good idea." He hesitated but couldn't resist. "I guess it's one of those crazy Jedi things." "Very funny," Han growled. He looked around the room again. "Lando? Winter? Come on, one of you say something." "Don't look at me, Han," Lando said, holding up his hands. "I'm out of this part of the discussion." "As for me, I trust Princess Leia's judgment," Winter added. "If she believes you'll be safe, I'm willing to accept that. You've got a few days to get used to the idea," Leia reminded him before Han could say anything more. "Maybe we can change your mind." The look on Han's face wasn't encouraging, but he nodded anyway. "Yeah, sure." There was a moment of silence. "So that's it?" Lando asked at last. "That's it," Leia confirmed. "We've got a mission to plan. Let's get to it." From the corner of the communications desk, the intercom pinged. "Card?" Duncan's voice came tiredly. "We're coming up on the Bill Bringy system. Break out in about 5 minutes. We'll be right there," Card told him. "Make sure the turbo lasers are manned. No telling what we're going to run into." "Right," Duncan said. "Out." Card tapped off the intercom and keyed off the desk's decryptors. "He sounds tired," Aves commented from the other side of the desk as he put down his datapad. "Almost as tired as you look," Card said, giving the display he'd been studying one last scan before shutting it down as well. The report from his people on Anchoron, like the others before it, all negative. "Must be too long since we've had to pull double shifts," he added to Aves. "No one's used to it anymore. I'll have to include that in future training exercises." "I'm sure the crew will love it," Aves said dryly. "We'd hate to have people think we were soft. Contrary to our image," Card agreed, standing up. "Let's go. We'll finish sorting through these later." "For all the good it'll do," Aves grunted. "Are you absolutely sure those were clones Skywalker spotted on Burchest?" "Skywalker was sure," Card said as they left the office and headed for the bridge. "I trust you're not suggesting the noble Jedi would have lied to me." "Not lied, no," Aves shook his head. "I'm just wondering if the whole thing could have been a setup. Something Thrawn deliberately dangled in front of you to put us off the real pipeline." "That thought has occurred to me," Card agreed. "Even given Governor Stafford's indebtedness to us, we seem to get in and out of the system just that little bit too easily. You didn't mention these reservations when you were passing out search assignments back at Chazwa. I'm sure similar thoughts have already occurred to each of the others," Card assured him, "just as the thought has undoubtedly occurred to them that if there's an Imperial agent among us, we should do our best to keep him believing we're buying Grand Admiral Thrawn's deception, if it is a deception, and if there is an Imperial agent in the group," Aves said. Card smiled. "If we had some Bralki, we could have Bralki. And Menkuro, if we had some Menkuro." Aves finished the old saying. "You still think Ferry is working for Thrawn, don't you?" Card shrugged. "It's only his word against Solo's that he wasn't a willing agent of the Empire in the Katana fleet business. That's why you had 12 take that assault shuttle off to the Roche system." "Right," Card nodded, wishing briefly that Mara was here. Aves was a good enough man, but he needed things laid out in front of him that Mara would have instantly picked up on her own. I know a couple of Verpine out there who owe me a favour. If the assault shuttle is rigged in any way, they'll find it. The door to the bridge slid open and they stepped inside. Status? Card asked as he glanced through the viewport at the mottled sky of hyperspace rolling past. All systems showing ready, Dankin said, yielding the helm seat to Aves. Ballig, Lockton, and Corvus are at the turbo lasers. Thank you, Card said, sitting down beside Aves at the co-pilot station. Stick around, Dankin. You're going to be captain today. I'm honoured, Dankin said wryly, stepping over to the comm station and sitting down. What do you suppose this is all about? Aves asked as he got the ship ready for breakout. No idea, Card admitted. According to Partar, all Mazik would say was that I might want to come by Bilbringi after our rendezvous with the others at Chowswa. Probably the eye-catching lesson for the Empire he and Ella were talking about at Trogan. Aves said heavily. I don't think I'm going to like this. Just remember that whatever happens, we're innocent bystanders, Card reminded him. An incoming freighter with an authorized delivery schedule and a cargo of Cohen Sayer power converters. Perfectly legitimate. As long as I don't look too close at any of it, Aves said. Okay, here we go. He eased the hyperdrive levers forward, and the star lines appeared and collapsed again into a background of stars. A background of stars, half-completed ships, service and construction vessels, and floating dockyard platforms. And almost directly ahead of the wildcard, a massive Golan II battle station bristling with armaments. They had arrived at the Imperial shipyards of Bilbringi. Dankin whistled softly. Look at all that new construction, he said, his voice awed. They aren't kidding around, are they? No, they're not, Card agreed. Nor are they kidding around at Ord Trasi or Yaga Minor. And if Thrawn was putting half as much effort into his cloning operation as he was into warship construction... Incoming Frida, this is Bilbringi Control. An official-sounding voice came from the comm cut him off. Identify yourself and your home port and state your business. Dankin? Card murmured. Dankin nodded. Frida Hab Camber out of Valar, he said briskly into the comm. Captain Abel Quiller in command, carrying a shipment of power converters for Dock 47. Acknowledged, the controller said. Stand by for confirmation. Aves tapped Card on the arm and pointed to the battle station ahead. They're launching an assault shuttle, he said, and launching it in the wildcard's direction. Hold course, Card told him quietly. They may just be seeing how nervous we are, or else they're expecting trouble, Aves countered. Or are cleaning up after it, Dankin put in. If Mazik's already been here. Frida Hab Camber, you're ordered to hold position there, the controller broke in. An inspection team is on its way to examine your shipment order. Dankin keyed the comm. Why, what's wrong with it? He asked with just the right mixture of puzzlement and annoyance. Look, I've got a business to run here. I haven't got time for any bureaucratic nonsense. If you'd prefer, we can arrange to end all your scheduling problems right here and now, the controller offered in a nasty voice. If that doesn't appeal to you, I suggest you prepare to receive boarders. Acknowledged, Control, Dankin growled. I just hope they're fast. Control out. Dankin looked at Card. Now what? You prepare to receive boarders, Card said, letting his gaze sweep across the expanse of the shipyards. If Mazik was keeping to the tentative schedule he'd given Partar, he ought to be showing up sometime soon. He paused. Aves, get me a reading on those, he said, pointing to a cluster of dark irregular spots drifting near the centre of the shipyard area. They don't look like ships to me. They're not, Aves confirmed a few seconds later. Look to be mid-sized asteroids, maybe 40 meters across each. I make the count. 22 of them. Odd, Card said, frowning at the sensor-focused display Aves had pulled up. There were over 30 small support craft in the area he saw, for what seemed to be a similar number of maintenance-suited workers moving around the asteroids. I wonder what the Imperials are doing with that many asteroids. Could be mining them, Aves suggested hesitantly. I've never heard of anyone hauling the whole asteroid to a shipyard, though. Neither have I, Card nodded. It's just a thought, but I wonder if they could have something to do with Thrawn's magic superweapon, the one he hit Yukio and Woostri with. That might explain the heavy security, Aves said. Speaking of which, that assault shuttle is still coming. Are we going to let them board? Unless you'd rather turn and run, I didn't see many alternatives, Card said. Dankin, how much scrutiny can our delivery schedule handle? It can stand a lot, Dankin said slowly. Depends a little on if they suspect something or if they're just being careful. Card, take a look about 40 degrees to port side. That half-finished Imperial Star Destroyer. See it? Card swiveled in his seat. The Star Destroyer was, in fact, considerably more than half-finished, with only the command superstructure and sections of the forward bastion ridgeline left to add. I see it, he said. What about it? There seems to be some activity around, and in mid-sentence the starboard flank of the Star Destroyer blew up. Aves whistled in startled awe. Scratch one warship, he said as a section of the forward hull followed the flank to fiery oblivion. Mazik, you think? I don't think there's any doubt, Card said, keying his main display for a closer view. For a moment, silhouetted against the boiling flames, he caught a glimpse of a half-dozen Frida-sized craft angling swiftly toward the shipyard perimeter. I also think they may have cut things a bit too fine, he added, looking up again at the Star Destroyer. A group of disaster control craft were already swarming in toward the burning ship, 3 squadrons of TIE fighters right behind them. When abruptly the focal point of the incoming fighter cloud shifted from the Star Destroyer to the vector the escaping freighters had taken. They've been spotted, Card said grimly, giving the situation a quick assessment. Mazik's group was outnumbered and outgunned, an imbalance that would likely get worse before they could get far enough out from the shipyard clutter to make their escape to hyperspace. The Wildcard's 3 turbo lasers would go a long way toward evening those odds. Unfortunately, the center of action was too far away from them to make any significant difference to the outcome. "We going to help him out?" Aves murmured. "By all rights, we shouldn't lift a finger," Carl told him, keying the nav computer to start their own lightspeed calculation and tapping the intercom. "Helping to salvage careless tactical planning only encourages more of the same, but I suppose we can't just sit here." "Corvus?" "Here," Corvus's voice came. "My command you to open fire on that approaching assault shuttle," Card ordered. "Balig and Lockton, you target the battle station. See how much chaos we can cause. At the same time, Aves, you'll bring us around onto a vector of—" "Wait a minute, Card." Dankin cut him off. "Fair. 50 degrees port side." Card looked. There, straddling the same vector Mazik's sabotage crew was escaping along, a pair of Corellian gunships had shot in from hyperspace. A formation of TIE fighters that had been sweeping in from approximately that direction swerved to intercept and were promptly blown into flaming dust. "Well, well," Card said. "Perhaps Mazik's tactics aren't as bad as I thought." "That's got to be Elor's people," Ave said. Card nodded. "Agreed. Corellian gunships are a bit out of Mazik's style, certainly out of his budget. It's a strategy that would certainly appeal to the legendary Duros' cultural recklessness." "I'd have thought Corellian gunships would be a strain on Elor's budget too," Dankin commented. "You think he stole them from the New Republic?" "Stole is such a harsh word," Card chided mildly. "I expect he considers them merely an informal loan. New Republic ships often used a line of Duros maintenance depots scattered through the trade spine, and Elor has a silent interest in several of them. I bet there'll be some complaints about the service this time around," Ave said dryly. "By the way, are we still planning to hit that assault shuttle?" Card had almost forgotten about that. "No, actually. Corvus, Balik, Lockton, power down those turbo lasers. Everyone else, stand down from alert and prepare to receive Imperial inspectors." He got acknowledgements and turned back to find Ave staring at him. "We're not going to run?" the other asked carefully. "Not even after that?" He nodded toward the firefight blazing off to port side. "What's happening out there has absolutely nothing to do with us," Card said, giving the other his best innocent look. "We're an independent freighter with a cargo of power converters. Remember?" "Yeah, but more to the point, it might be useful to see what happens in the aftermath of this raid," Card went on, gazing back at the ships. "With their immediate exit vector being covered by Elor's gunships, and with the Yard's capital ships too far away to reach them in time, the raiders looked well on their way to a relatively clean escape. Listen to their communications traffic, watch their cleanup and post-raid security adjustments, get an assessment of how much damage was actually done, that sort of thing." Aves didn't look convinced, but he knew better than to argue the point. "If you think we can pull it off," he said doubtfully, "I mean with the bounty on us and all, this is the last place an Imperial commander would expect us to show up," Card assured him. "Hence no one here will be watching for us." "Certainly not on a ship under the command of Captain Abel Quiller," Dankin said, unstrapping and standing up. "Impatient and bombastic, right?" "Right," Card said, "but don't overdo the bombastic part. We don't want any hostility toward you, just contempt." "Got it," Dankin nodded. He left the bridge, and Card turned back to gaze at the smouldering wreckage of the now stillborn Star Destroyer. An eye-catching lesson indeed, and one that Card would have argued strongly against if Mazik and Elor had asked his advice. But they hadn't, and they'd gone ahead and done it. And now the lot was even more strongly cast than it had been after Trogan, because Grand Admiral Thrawn would not let this go by without a swift and violent response, and if he could trace the attack back to Mazik, and from there back to him. "We're not going to be able to stop here," he murmured, half to himself. "We're going to have to organize. All of us." "What?" Aves asked. Card focused on him. On that open and puzzled face, clever in its own way but neither brilliant nor intuitive. "Never mind," he told the other, smiling to take any possible sting out of the words. He turned back to the approaching assault shuttle, and vowed that when this was over, he would find a way to get Mara back. The last page scrolled across the display, and Thrawn looked up at the man standing at stiff attention before him. "Have you anything to add to this report, General Drost?" he asked, his voice quiet. Far too quiet, in Palaon's opinion. Certainly quieter than Palaon's voice would have been had he been in command here. Looking out the Chimera's viewport at the blackened wreckage that had once been a nearly completed and highly valuable Imperial Star Destroyer, it was all he could do to stand silently beside the Grand Admiral, not take Drost's head off. It was no more than the man deserved, and Drost knew it. "No, sir," he said, his voice sounding strained. Thrawn held his eyes a moment longer, then turned his gaze out the viewport. "Can you offer me any reason why you should not be relieved of command?" The faintest of sighs escaped Drost's lips. "No, sir," he said again. For a long moment the only sound was the muted background murmur of the Chimera's bridge. Palaon glowered at Drost's carved stone face, wondering what his punishment would be. At the very least, a fiasco like this ought to earn him a summary court-martial and dismissal on charges of gross negligence, at the very most. Well, there was always Lord Vader's traditional response to incompetence, and Rourke was already standing close at hand behind Thrawn's command chair. "Return to your headquarters, General," Thrawn said. "The Chimera will be leaving here in approximately 30 hours. You have until then to design and implement a new security system for the shipyards. At that point, I'll make my decision about your future." Drost glanced at Palaon, looked back at Thrawn. "Understood, sir," he said. "I won't fail you again, Admiral." "I trust not," Thrawn said, the barest hint of veiled threat in his voice. "Dismissed." Drost nodded and turned away, a freshly awakened determination in his step. "You disapprove, Captain?" Palaon forced himself to meet those glowing red eyes. "I would have thought a more punitive response would be called for," he said. "Drost is a good enough man in his way," Thrawn said evenly. "His chief weakness is a tendency to become complacent. For the immediate future, at least, he should be cured of that." Palaon looked back at the wreckage outside the Chimera's viewport. "A rather expensive lesson," he said sourly. "Yes," Thrawn agreed. "And it demonstrates precisely why I didn't want card smuggler associates stirred up." Palaon frowned at him. "This was the smugglers? I assumed it was a rebel sabotage squad." "Drost is under that same impression," Thrawn said, "but the method and execution here was quite different than from the usual rebel pattern. Mazik, I think, is the most likely suspect, though there are enough Duros elements woven into the style for Elor's group to also have been involved." "I see," Palaon said slowly. "This put an entirely new spin on things. I presume that we'll be teaching them the folly of attacking the Empire." "I would like nothing better," Thrawn agreed. "And at the height of the Empire's power, I wouldn't have hesitated to do so. Unfortunately, at this point, such a reaction would be counterproductive. Not only would it harden the smugglers' resolve, but would risk bringing others of the galaxy's fringe elements into open hostility against us." "We surely don't need their assistance and services that badly," Palaon said. "Not now. Our need for such vermin has certainly been reduced," Thrawn said. "That doesn't mean we're yet in a position to abandon them entirely. But that's not really the point. The problem is the dangerous fact that those in the fringe are highly experienced at operating within official circles without any official permission to do so. Keeping them out of places like Bilbringi would require far more manpower than we have to spare at present." Palaon ground his teeth. "I understand that, sir, but we can't simply ignore an attack of this magnitude." "We won't," Thrawn promised quietly, his eyes glittering, "and when it comes, our response will be to the Empire's best advantage." He swiveled his chair to face the center of the shipyards. "In the meantime, Grand Admiral Thrawn!" The shout roared through the bridge like a violent thunderclap, filling it from aft to forward and echoing back again. Palaon wrenched himself around, reflexively scrabbling for the blaster he wasn't wearing. Drorus Sabaoth was striding toward them across the bridge, his eyes flashing above his flowing beard. An angry radiance seemed to burn the air around him. Behind him, the two stormtroopers guarding the entrance to the bridge were sprawled on the floor, unconscious or dead. Palaon swallowed hard, his hand groping for and finding the reassuring presence of the Asalamir nutrient frame stretched across the top of the Grand Admiral's command chair. The frame rotated away from his touch as Thrawn swiveled to face the approaching Jedi Master. "You wish to speak to me, Master Sabaoth?" "They have failed, Grand Admiral Thrawn," Sabaoth snarled at him. "Do you hear me? Your commandos have failed." "I hear you," Thrawn nodded calmly. "What have you done to my guards?" "My men!" Sabaoth snapped, his voice again reverberating around the bridge. Even without the element of surprise, the trick was an effective one. "Mine! I command the Empire, Grand Admiral Thrawn, not you." Thrawn turned to the side and caught the eye of the portside crew pit officer. "Call sickbay," he ordered the man. "Have them send a team." For a few painful heartbeats, Palaon thought Sabaoth was going to object, or worse, take the crew pit officer down too, but all his attention seemed to be focused on Thrawn. "Your commandos have failed, Grand Admiral Thrawn," he repeated, his voice now quiet and lethal. "I know," Thrawn said. "All of them except the Major and Command appear to have been killed." Sabaoth drew himself up. "Then it is time for me to take this task upon myself. You will take me to Coruscant. Now." Thrawn nodded. "Very well, Master Sabaoth. We will load my special cargo, and then we shall go." It was clearly not the answer Sabaoth was expecting. "What?" he demanded, frowning. "I said that as soon as the special cargo has been loaded aboard the Chimera and the other ships will leave here for Coruscant," Thrawn said. Sabaoth shot a look at Palaon, his eyes seeming to probe for the information his Jedi senses were blinded to. "What is this trick?" he growled. looking back at Thrawn. "There is no trick," Thrawn assured him. "I've decided that a lightning thrust into the heart of the rebellion will be the best way to shake their morale and prepare them for the next stage of the campaign. This will be that thrust." Sabaoth looked out the viewport, his eyes searching the vast reaches of the Bilbringi shipyards. His gaze swept past the blackened hulk of the Star Destroyer, drifted to the asteroids clustered in the central sector. "Those?" he demanded, jabbing a finger toward them. "Are those your special cargo?" "You're the Jedi Master?" Thrawn said. "You tell me." Sabaoth glared at him, and Palaon held his breath. The Grand Admiral was baiting him. Palaon knew. A rather dangerous game, in his opinion. The only people who knew precisely what Thrawn had in mind for those asteroids were currently protected by a Salamiri. "Very well, Grand Admiral Thrawn," Sabaoth said. "I will." He took a deep breath and closed his eyes, and the lines in his face sharpened with a depth of mental strain Palaon hadn't seen in the Jedi Master for a long time. He watched the other, wondering what he was up to, and suddenly he understood. Out there, around the asteroids, were hundreds of officers and techs who had worked on the project, each of them with his own private speculations as to what the whole thing was about. Sabaoth was reaching out to all those minds, trying to draw out those speculations and compile them into a complete picture. "No!" he snapped suddenly, turning his flashing eyes on Thrawn again. "You can't destroy Coruscant. Not until I have my Jedi." Thrawn shook his head. "I have no intention of destroying Coruscant." "You lie!" Sabaoth cut him off, jabbing an accusing finger at him. "You always lie to me, but no more. No more. I command the Empire, and all its forces." He raised his hands above his head, an eerie blue-white coronal sheen playing about them. Palaon cringed despite himself, remembering the lightning bolts Sabaoth had thrown at them in the crypt on Wayland, but no lightning came. Sabaoth simply stood there, his hands clutching at empty air, his eyes gazing toward infinity. Palaon frowned at him, and he was just considering asking Sabaoth what he was talking about when he happened to glance down into the portside crew pit. The crews were sitting stiffly in their chairs, their backs parried ground straight, their hands folded in their laps, their eyes staring blankly through their consoles. Behind them the officers were equally stiff, equally motionless, equally oblivious. The starboard crew pit was the same as the aft bridge, and on the consoles Palaon could see, which should have been active with incoming reports from other sectors of the ship, for displays had all gone static. It was the moment Palaon had expected and dreaded since that first visit to Wayland. Sabaoth had taken command of the Chimera. "Impressive," Thrawn said into the boat-riddled silence. "Very impressive indeed. And what do you propose to do now?" "Need I repeat myself?" Sabaoth said, his voice trembling slightly with obvious strain. "I will take the ship to Coruscant, to take my Jedi, not to destroy them." "It's a minimum of 5 days to Coruscant from here," Thrawn said coldly. 5 days during which you'll have to maintain your control of the Chimera's 37,000 crewers. Longer, of course, if you intend for them to actually fight at the end of that voyage. And if you intend for us to arrive with any support craft, that figure of 37,000 will increase rather steeply. Sabaoth snorted contemptuously. "You doubt the power of the Force, Grand Admiral Thrawn?" "Not at all," Thrawn said. "I merely present the problem you and the Force will have to solve if you continue with this course of action. For instance, do you know where the Coruscant sector fleet is based, or the number and types of ships making it up? Have you thought about how you will neutralize Coruscant's orbital battle stations and ground-based systems? Do you know who is in command of the planet's defenses at present, and how he or she is likely to deploy the available forces? Have you considered Coruscant's energy field? Do you know how best to use the strategic and tactical capabilities of an Imperial Star Destroyer?" "You seek to confuse me," Sabaoth accused. "Your men, my men, know the answers to all those questions." "To some of them, yes," Thrawn said, "but you cannot learn the answers. Not all of them. Certainly not quickly enough." "I control the Force," Sabaoth repeated angrily, but to Palaon's ear there was a hint of pleading in the tone, like a child throwing a tantrum that he didn't really expect to get him anywhere. "No," Thrawn said, his voice abruptly soothing. Perhaps he too had picked up on Sabaoth's tone. "The galaxy is not yet ready for you to lead, Master Sabaoth. Later, when order has been restored, I will present it to you to govern as you please. But that time is not yet." For a long moment Sabaoth remained motionless, his mouth working half invisibly behind his flowing beard. Then, almost reluctantly, he lowered his arms, and as he did so, the bridge was filled with muffled gasps and groans and the scraping of boots on steel decking as the crews were released from the Jedi Master's control. "You will never present the Empire to me," Sabaoth told Thrawn. "Not of your own will. That may depend on your ability to maintain that which I am in the process of recreating," Thrawn said, "and which will not come to be at all without you." Thrawn cocked an eyebrow. "You're the Jedi Master, As you gaze into the future, can you see a future empire arising without me? I see many possible futures, Sabaoth said. In not all of them do you survive. An uncertainty faced by all warriors, Thrawn nodded. But that was not what I asked. Sabaoth smiled thinly. Never assume you are indispensable to my empire, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Only I am that. He sent his gaze leisurely round the bridge, then drew himself to his full height. For now, however, I am pleased that you should lead my forces into battle. He looked back sharply at Thrawn. You may lead, but you will not destroy Coruscant. Not until I have my Jedi. As I have said already, I have no intention of destroying Coruscant. Thrawn told him. For now, the fear and undermining of morale that accompany a siege will serve my purposes better. Our purposes, Sabaoth corrected. Do not forget that, Grand Admiral Thrawn. I forget nothing, Master Sabaoth. Thrawn countered quietly. Good, Sabaoth said, just as quietly. Then you may carry on with your duties. I will be meditating, should you require me, meditating upon the future of my empire. He turned and strode off the bridge, and Palaeon let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Admiral, signal the relentless captain, Thrawn ordered, him swiveling back around again. Tell Captain Dorja I need a 500-man caretaker crew for the next 6 hours. Palaeon looked down into the portside crew pit. Here and there one could see a crew sitting properly at his station or an officer standing more or less vertically, but for the most part the crews were collapsed limply in their seats, their officers leaning against walls and consoles or lying trembling on the deck. Yes, sir, he said, stepping back to his chair and keying for comm. Will you be postponing the Coruscant operation? No more than absolutely necessary, Thrawn said. History is on the move, Captain. Those who cannot keep up will be left behind, to watch from a distance. He glanced back at the door through which Sabaoth had departed. And those who stand in our way, he added softly, will not watch at all. They came into Coruscant in the dead of night, 10 of them, disguised as Jawas, slipping in through the secret entrance that palace security had carefully sealed and that Luke had now just as carefully unsealed. Getting to the tower unseen was no problem. No one had yet had the time to do anything about the Emperor's limited maze of hidden passageways. So they filed silently into the suite behind Luke. For the first time, Han found himself face to face with the bodyguards his wife had chosen to protect her and her children from the Empire. A group of Nograi. We greet you, Lady Vader, the first of the grey-skinned aliens said in a gravelly voice, dropping to the floor and spreading his arms out to his sides. The others followed suit, which would have been awkward or at least crowded in the narrow suite entryway. It wasn't, which probably said something about their agility. I'm Kakmaim, warrior of the clan Aikmir, the Nograi continued, talking toward the floor. I lead the honor guard of the Malariush. To your service and protection we commit ourselves and our lives. You may rise, Leia said, her voice solemnly regal. Han stole a glance at her, to find that her face and posture were just as stately as her voice. Sort of authority stuff that usually kicked in his automatic disobedience circuits, but on Leia it looked good. As the Malariush, I accept your service. The Nograi got to their feet, making no more noise than they had getting down. My lieutenant, Mobvekar, Clan Hakar, Kakmaim said, indicating the Nograi to his right. He will lead the second watch. My husband Han Solo, Leia responded, gesturing to Han. Kakmaim turned to face him, and with a conscious effort Han kept his hand away from his blaster. We greet you, the alien said gravely. The Nograi honor the consort of the Lady Vader. The consort? Han threw a startled look at Leia. Her expression was still serious, but he could see the edge of an amused smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Thanks, Han growled. Nice meeting you too. And you, Karbarak, Leia said, holding her hand out to another of the Nograi. It's good to see you again. I trust the matriarch of your family is well. She is very well, my lady, the Nograi said, stepping forward from the group to take her hand. She sends her greetings, as well as a renewed promise of her service. Behind the Nograi, the door opened and Chewbacca slipped inside. Any trouble? Han asked him, glad of a distraction from all these pleasantries. Chewbacca growled a negative, his eyes searching the group of aliens. He spotted Karbarak and moved to the Nograi's side, rumbling a greeting. Karbarak greeted him in turn. Which others will be under our protection, Lady Vader? Kakmaim asked. My aide, Winter, and my twins, Leia said. Come, I'll show you. She headed toward the bedroom with Kakmaim and Mobvekar at her sides. The rest of the aliens began to spread out around the suite, giving special attention to the walls and doors. Chewbacca and Karbarak headed off toward Winter's room together, conversing quietly between themselves. You still don't like this, do you? Leia said from Han's side. Not really, no, Han conceded, watching Chewbacca and Karbarak, but I don't seem to have a lot of choices. He sensed Luke shrug. You and Chewie could stay here, he offered. Lando, Mara, and I could go to Wayland by ourselves. Or you could take the Nograi with you, Han suggested dryly. At least out there you wouldn't have to worry about anyone seeing them. No one will see us here. a gravelly voice muted his elbow. Han jerked, hand dropping to his blaster as he spun around. There was a Nograi standing there all right. He would have sworn none of the half-sized aliens were anywhere near him. You always sneak up on people like that? He demanded. The alien bowed his head. Forgive me, consort of the Lady Vader. I meant no offense. They're great hunters, Luke murmured. Yeah, I'd heard that, Han said, turning back to Luke. Impressive, sure, but it was never the alien's ability to protect Leia and the twins that he'd worried about. Look, Luke, they're all right, Han, Luke said quietly. Really they are. Leia's already trusted them once of her life. Yeah, Han said again, tried to erase the image of Leia and the twins in Imperial hands. Everything go all right at the landing pad? No problems, Luke assured him. Wedge and a couple of his Rogue Squadron teammates were there to fly escort, and Chewie got the ship under cover. No one saw us come into the palace either. I hope you sealed the door behind you, Han said. If another Imperial team gets in, Leia's going to have her hands full. It's closed, but not really sealed. Luke shook his head. We'll have Karkmime seal it behind us. Han frowned at him, an unpleasant suspicion forming in his gut. You suggesting we go now? Can you think of a better time? Luke countered. I mean, the Nograi are here and the Falcon's loaded and ready. No one's likely to miss Mara until morning. Han looked over Luke's shoulder to where Leia was just emerging from the bedroom with her Nograi escort still in tow. It made sense, he had to admit that, but somehow he'd counted on him and Leia having a little more time together, except that the Empire would still be making clones during that time. He grimaced. All right, he grumbled. Sure. Why not? I know, Luke said sympathetically, and I'm sorry. Forget it. How do you want to do this? Lando and I will go get Mara out, Luke said, all business again. Probably could tell that Han wasn't in the mood for sympathy. You and Chewie get the Falcon and pick us up. And don't forget to bring the droids. Right, Han said, feeling his lip twist. It wasn't bad enough that he had to leave Leia and his kids to go break into another Imperial stronghold. He had to have 3PO along yakking his overcultured metal head off, too. It just got better and better. You got the restraining bolt Chewie rigged up? Right here, Luke nodded, patting his jacket. I know where to attach it, too. Just don't miss, Han warned. You get a G2RD droid going and you'll have to take its head off to stop it. I understand, Luke nodded. We'll meet you out where we hid the Nograi ship. Chewie knows the place. He turned and headed toward the door. Good luck, Han muttered under his breath. He started to turn. What are you looking at? He demanded. The Nograi standing there bowed his head. I meant no offense, consort of the Lady Vader, he assured Han. Turning away, he resumed his study of the wall. Grimacing, Han looked around for Leia. Okay, he'd leave tonight, but he wasn't going anywhere until he'd said goodbye to his wife. And in private. The Emperor raised his hands, sending cascades of jagged blue-white lightning at his enemies. Both men staggered under the counterattack, and Mara watched with the sudden agonized hope that this time it might end differently. But no, Vader and Skywalker straightened, and with an electronic-sounding shriek of rage, they lifted their lightsabers high. Mara snapped awake, her hand groping automatically under her bed for the blaster that wasn't there. That shriek had sounded like the start of an alarm from the G2RD droid outside her room, an alarm that had been suddenly cut off. Across the room, the lock clicked open. Mara's searching hand touched the datapad she'd been reading from before going to sleep, and as the door swung open, she hurled the instrument with all her strength at the dark figure silhouetted in the doorway. The impromptu missile never reached him. The figure simply held up a hand, and the datapad skidded to a halt in midair. It's all right, Mama, he murmured just as he took another step into the room. It's just me, Luke Skywalker. Mara frowned through the darkness, stretching out with her mind toward the intruder. It was Skywalker, all right. What do you want? She demanded. We're here to get you out, Skywalker told her, stepping over to the desk and turning on a low light. Come on, you've got to get dressed. I do, huh? Mara retorted, squinting for a moment before her eyes adjusted to the light. Mind telling me where we're going? A slight frown creased Skywalker's forehead. We're going to Wayland, he said. You told Leia you could find it. Mara stared at him. Sure, I told her that. When did I ever say I'd take anyone there? You have to, Mara, Skywalker said, his voice laced with that irritating idealistic earnestness of his, the same earnestness that had stopped her from killing that insane Joris at Bayoff back on Jomark. We're standing on the edge of a new round of Clone Wars here. We have to stop it. So go stop it, she retorted. This isn't my war, Skywalker. But the words are more reflex, and she knew it. The minute she told Organa Solo about the Emperor's storehouse, she had committed herself to this side of the war, and that meant doing whatever she was called on to do, even if it meant taking them personally to Wayland. With all those well-trained Jedi insights, Skywalker must have seen that too. Fortunately, he had the sense not to throw any of it back into her face. All right, she growled, swinging her legs out of bed. Wait outside. I'll be right there. She had time while dressing to sweep the area with her far less trained Force abilities, and was therefore not surprised to find Calrissian waiting with Skywalker when she emerged from her suite. The condition of the G2RD was a surprise, though. From the way that electronic shriek had been truncated, she'd expected to find the guard droid scattered around the hallway in several pieces. Instead, it was standing perfectly intact beside her door, quivering slightly with mechanical rage or frustration. "You put a restraining bolt on it," Skywalker answered her unspoken question. She looked and spotted the flat device attached to the droid's side. "I didn't think you could restrain a guard droid. It's not easy, but Han and Chewie knew a way to do it," Skywalker said as the three of them hurried down the hallway toward the turbo lifts. They thought this would make the prison break a little less conspicuous. Prison break. Mara threw a glance at Skywalker's profile, the word suddenly putting this whole thing into a new perspective. Here he was, Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, hero of the rebellion, pillar of law and justice, and he just defied the entire New Republic establishment from Mon Mothma on down to get her out. Mara Jade, a smuggler to whom he owed not a single thing and who in fact had promised to kill him. All because he saw what needed to be done, and he trusted her to help him do it. "A nice trick," she murmured, glancing down across corridors they passed, her eyes and mind alert for guards. "I'll have to get Solo to teach it to me." Calrissian brought the airspeeder down at what appeared to be an old private landing pad. The Millennium Falcon was already there, an obviously nervous and impatient Chewbacca waiting for them at the open hatchway. "About time," Solo said as Mara followed Skywalker into the cockpit. They were barely aboard, she saw, and already had the freighter in the air. He must be as nervous about this as the Wookiee. "Okay, Mara, where do we go?" "Set course for Abroa Sky," she told him. "That was the last stop before Wayland on that trip. I should be able to have the rest of it plotted out by the time we get there." "Let's hope so," Solo said, reaching around to key the nav computer. "Better strap in. We'll be making the jump to lightspeed as soon as we're clear." Mara slid into the passenger seat behind him, Skywalker taking the other one. "What kind of assault force are we taking?" she asked as she strapped in. "You're looking at it," Solo grunted. "You, me, Luke, Lando, and Chewie." "I see," Mara said, swallowing hard. 5 of them against whatever defenses Thrawn would have set up to protect his most vital military base. Terrific. "You sure we're not being unsupporting about it?" she asked sarcastically. "We didn't have a lot more than this at Yavin," Solo pointed out. "Or at Endor." She glared at the back of his head, willing the anger and hatred to flow, but all she felt was a quiet and strangely distant ache. "Your confidence is so very reassuring," she bit out. Solo shrugged. "You can get a lot of distance out of not doing what the other side expects you to," he said. "Remind me sometime to tell you how we got away from Hoth." Behind them, the door slid open and Chewbacca lumbered into the cockpit. "Everything all set back there?" Solo asked him. The Wookiee rumbled something that was probably an affirmation. "Good. Run a quick check on the alluvial dampers. They were sparking red a while back." Another rumble and the Wookiee got to work. "Before I forget, Luke," Solo added, "you're in charge of those droids back there. I don't want to see 3PO fiddling with anything unless Chewie or Lando is with him. Got that?" "Got it," Skywalker said. He caught Mara's eye and threw her an amused grin. 3PO sometimes has extra time on his hands, he explained. "He's taken an interest in mechanical work, and he's pretty bad at it," Solo put in sourly. "Okay, Chewie, get ready. Here we go." He pulled on the back on the hyperdrive levers. Through the viewport the stars flared into star lines, and they were on their way. 5 of them, on their way to invade an Imperial stronghold. Mara looked over at Skywalker, and the only one of them who really trusted her was the one man she had to kill. "Your first command since you resigned your commission, Han," Skywalker commented into the silence. "Yeah," Solo said tightly. "Let's just hope it's not my last." "The Bellicose Task Force has arrived, Captain," the comm officer called up to the Chimera's command walkway. "Captain Aban reports all ships at battle readiness and requests final deployment orders." "Relay them to him, Lieutenant," Palaon ordered, peering out the viewport at the new group of running lights that had appeared off to starboard and trying to suppress the growing sense of apprehension that was curling through his gut like wisps of poisoned smoke. It was all well and good for Thrawn to assemble the Empire's seasoned elite for what amounted to an extended hit and fade attack on Coruscant. What was not so well and good was the possibility that the raid might not stop there. Sabaoth was aboard, and Sabaoth's sole agenda these days seemed to be the capture of Leia Organa Solo and her twins. He'd already demonstrated his ability to take absolute control of the Chimera and its crewers, an arrogant little stunt that had already delayed this operation by several hours. If he decided to do it again in the thick of battle off Coruscant, Palaon grimaced, the ghostly memories of the Empire's defeat at Endor floating up before his eyes. The second Death Star had died there, along with Vader's Super Star Destroyer Executor, and far too many of the best and brightest of the Empire's officer corps. If Sabaoth's interference precipitated a repetition of that debacle, if the Empire had lost both Grand Admiral Thrawn and his core Star Destroyer force, it might never again recover. He was still gazing out the viewport at the gathering assault force, trying to suppress his concerns, when a rustle of uneasiness rippled across the bridge around him, and even without looking he knew what it meant. Sabaoth was here. Palaon's command chair and his protecting Isalamir were a dozen long steps away, far too distant to reach without looking obvious about it. None of the other Isalamiri scattered around the bridge were within reach, either. It wouldn't do to go running around like a frightened field scurry in front of his crew, even if Sabaoth was willing to let him. and if the Jedi Master chose instead to paralyze him like he had the rest of the Chimera's crew at Bilbringi, a shiver ran up Palaion's back. He'd seen the medical reports for those who'd had to recover in sickbay, and he had no desire to go through that himself. Aside from the discomfort and emotional confusion involved, such a public humiliation would severely diminish his command authority aboard his ship. He could only hope that he'd be able to give C'baoth what he wanted without looking weak and subservient. Turning to face the approaching Jedi Master, he wondered if playing on this same fear of humiliation had been the way the Emperor had started his own rise to power. "Master C'baoth," he nodded gravely, "what may I do for you?" "I want a ship prepared for me at once," C'baoth said, his eyes blazing with a strange inward fire, "one with enough range to take me to Wayland." Palaon blinked. "To Wayland?" "Yes," C'baoth said, looking out the viewport. "I told you long ago that I would eventually take command there. That time has come." Palaon braced himself. "I was under the impression that you'd agree to assist if the Coruscant attack. I have changed my mind." C'baoth cut him off sharply, but with a strange sense of preoccupation. "Has something happened on Wayland?" Palaon asked. C'baoth looked at him, and Palaon had the odd sense that the Jedi Master was really only noticing him for the first time. "What happens or does not happen on Wayland is no concern of yours, Imperial Captain Palaon," he said. "Your only concern is to prepare me a ship." He looked out the viewport again. "Or do I need to choose my own?" A movement at the rear of the bridge caught Palaion's eye. Grand Admiral Thrawn, arriving from his private command room to oversee the final preparations for the Coruscant assault. As Palaon watched, Thrawn's glowing red eyes flicked across the scene, taking in C'baoth's presence and pausing momentarily on Palaion's face and posture. He turned his head and nodded, and a stormtrooper with the Asalamir nutrient frame on his back stepped to Thrawn's side. Together they started forward. C'baoth didn't bother to turn around. "You will prepare me a ship, Grand Admiral Thrawn," he called. "I wish to go to Wayland. Immediately." "Indeed," Thrawn said, stepping to Palaion's side. The stormtrooper moved between and behind the two of them, finally bringing Palaon into the safety of the Asalamir's force-empty bubble. "May I ask why?" "My reasons are my own," C'baoth said darkly. "Do you question them?" For a long moment Palaon was afraid Thrawn was going to take him up on that challenge. "Not at all," the Grand Admiral said at last. "If you wish to go to Wayland, you may of course do so." "Lieutenant Shell?" "Sir?" the young duty officer said from the portside crew pit, stiffening to attention. "Signal the Death's Head," Thrawn ordered. "Inform Captain Harbour that the Star Galleon Draclaw is to be detached from his group and reassigned to me. Crew only. I'll supply troops and passengers." "Yes, sir," Shell acknowledged, and stepped over to the comm station. "I did not ask for troops, Grand Admiral Thrawn," C'baoth said, his face alternating between petulance and suspicion, "nor for other passengers. I've been planning for some time to send General Covell to take command of the Mount Tantus garrison," Thrawn said, "as well as to supplement the troops already there. This would seem as good a time as any to do so." C'baoth looked at Palaon, then back to Thrawn. "All right," he said at last, apparently settling on petulance, "but it will be my ship, not Covell's. I will give the orders." "Of course, Master C'baoth," Thrawn said soothingly. "I will so inform the General." "All right." C'baoth's mouth worked uncertainly behind his long white beard, and for a moment Palaon thought he was going to lose control again. His head twitched to the side, then he was back in command of himself again. "All right," he repeated curtly. "I will be in my chambers. Call me when my ship is ready." "As you wish," Thrawn nodded. C'baoth threw each of them another piercing look, then turned and strode away. "Inform General Covell of this change of plans, Captain," Thrawn ordered Palaon, watching C'baoth make his way across the bridge. "The computer has a list of troops and crews assigned as cloning templates. Covell's aides will arrange for them to be put aboard the Draclaw, along with a company of the General's best troops." Palaon frowned at Thrawn's profile. Covell's troops, and Covell himself for that matter, had been slated to relieve the shock forces currently working their way across Kat Kreistak. "You think Mount Tantus is in danger?" he asked. "Not any substantial danger, no," Thrawn said. "Still, it's possible our far-seeing Jedi Master may indeed have picked up on something. Unrest among the natives, perhaps. Best not to take chances." Palaon looked out the viewport at the star that was Coruscant's sun. "Could it be something having to do with the rebels?" "Unlikely," Thrawn said. "There's no indication yet that they've even learned of Wayland's existence, let alone are planning any action against it. If and when that happens, we should have plenty of advance notice of their intentions, via Delta Source, and via normal intelligence channels." Thrawn smiled slightly. "It still disturbs you, doesn't it, to receive information from a source you don't understand?" "A little, sir, yes," Palaon admitted. "Consider it a cultivation of your trust," Thrawn said. "Some day I'll turn Delta Source over to you, but not yet." "Yes, sir," Palaon said. He looked aft, toward where C'baoth had disappeared from the bridge. Something about this was tickling uncomfortably in the back of his memory. Something about C'baoth and Wayland. "You seem disturbed, Captain," Thrawn said. Palaon shook his head. "I don't like the idea of him being inside Mount Tantus, Admiral. I don't know why. I just don't like it." Thrawn followed his gaze. "I wouldn't worry about it," he said quietly. "Actually, this is more likely to be a solution than a problem." Plan frowned. "I don't understand." Thrawn smiled again. "All in good time, Captain. But now to the business at hand. Is my flagship ready?" Plan shook his thoughts away. Now, if the center of the rebellion lying open before them was not the time for nameless fears. "The Chimera is fully at your command, Admiral," he gave the formal response. "Good." Thrawn sent his gaze around the bridge, then turned again to Palaeon. "Make certain the rest of the assault forces likewise, and inform them that we'll be waiting until the Draklaw has cleared the area." He looked out the viewport. "And then," he added softly, "we'll remind the rebellion what war is all about." They stood there silently, Mara and Luke, waiting as the dark hooded shadow moved toward them, a lightsaber glittering in its hand. Back behind the figure, an old man stood, craziness in his eyes and blue lightning in his hands. The shadow stopped and raised its weapon. Luke stepped away from Mara, lifting his own lightsaber, his mind filled with horror and dread. The alarms wailed through the suite from the corridor outside, jolting Leia awake and shattering the nightmare into fragments of vivid color. Her first thought was that the alarm was for Luke and Mara. Her second was that another Imperial commando team had gotten into the palace, but as she came awake enough to recognize the pitch of the alarm, she realized it was even worse. Coruscant was under attack. Across the room, the twins began to cry. "Winter!" Leia shouted, grabbing her robe and throwing what she could in the way of mental comfort in the twins' direction. Winter was already in the doorway, halfway into her own robe. "That's a battle alert," she called to Leia over the alarm. "I know," Leia said, tying the robe around her. "I have to get to the war room right away." "I understand," Winter said, peering intently at her face. "Are you all right?" "I had a dream, that's all," Leia told her, snagging a pair of half-boots and pulling them on. Trust Winter to pick up on something like that, even in the middle of chaos. Luke and Mara are having a battle with someone, and I don't think they were expecting to win. "Are you sure it was just a dream?" Leia bit at her lip as she fastened the half-boots. "I don't know," she had to admit. If it hadn't been a dream, but instead had been a Jedi vision... No, it had to be a dream, she decided. Luke would be able to tell from space if Sabaoth or another Dark Jedi was there. He wouldn't risk trying to carry out the mission under those conditions. "I hope not," Winter said, but she didn't sound all that confident about it. "Don't worry about it," Leia assured her. It was probably just a bad dream sparked by the alarms going off, and fueled by a guilty conscience, she added silently, for letting Han and Luke talk her into letting them go to Wayland in the first place. "Take care of the twins, will you?" "We'll watch them," Winter said. "We?" Leia glanced around, frowning, and for the first time spotted Mob Vekar and the other two Nograi who'd taken up positions in the shadows around the crib. They hadn't been there when she went to bed, she knew, which meant they must have slipped in from the suite's main living area sometime in the minute or so since the alarm had gone off. Without her noticing, "You may go without fear, Lady Vader," Mob Vekar said solemnly. "Your heirs will come to no harm." "I know," Leia said, and meant it. She picked up her comlink from her nightstand, considered calling for information, but slipped it into the side pocket of her robe instead. The last thing the war room staff needed right now was to have to spend time explaining the situation to a civilian. She'd know soon enough what was happening. "I'll be back when I can," she told Winter. Grabbing her lightsaber, she left the suite. The hallway outside was filled with beings of all sorts, some of them hurrying along on business, the rest milling around in confusion or demanding information from the security guard standing duty. Leia maneuvered her way past the guards and through the clumps of anxious discussion, joining a handful of sleep-tousled military aides hurrying toward the turbo lifts. A full car was just preparing to leave as she arrived. Two of the occupants, obviously recognizing Councillor Organa Solo, promptly gave up their places. The door slid shut behind her, barely missing a chattering pair of brown-robed Jawas who brazenly pushed their way aboard at the last instant, and they headed down. The entire lower floor of the palace was given over to military operations, starting with the support service officers on the periphery, moving inward to the offices of Akbar and Drayson and other duty commanders, and on to the more vital and sensitive areas in the center. Leia cleared herself through at the duty station, passed between a towering pair of Wookiee guards, and stepped through the blast doors into the war room. Bare minutes after the alarm had sounded, the place was already a scene of marginally controlled chaos as freshly awakened senior officers and aides hurried to battle positions. A single glance at the master tactical display showed that all the furor was fully justified. 8 Imperial interdictor cruisers had appeared in a loose grouping around the 116 vector in Sector 4, their hyperdrive dampening gravitic cones blocking all entry or exit from the region immediately around Coruscant. Even as she watched, a new group of ships flicked into the center of the cluster, 2 more interdictors plus an escort of 8 Katana fleet dreadnoughts. "What's going on?" An unfamiliar voice said at Leia's shoulder. She turned. A young man, a kid really, was standing there, scratching at a mop of tangled hair and frowning up at the tactical. For a moment she didn't recognize him, though her memory clicked. Ghent, the slicer card, had lent them to help crack the bank break-in code that the Imperials had framed Admiral Akbar with. She'd forgotten he was still here. "It's an Imperial attack," she said. Oh, he said. Can they do that? We're at war, she reminded him patiently. In war you can do just about anything the other side can't stop you from doing. How did you get in here anyway? Oh, I cut myself an entry code a while back, he said, waving a vague hand, his eyes still on the tactical. Haven't had much to do lately. Can't you stop them? We're certainly going to try, Leia said grimly, looking around the room. Across by the command console, she spotted General Riken. Stay out of the way and don't touch anything. She'd gone 2 steps toward Riken when her brain suddenly caught up with her. Gent, who'd cut himself a top-level access code because he didn't have anything better to do. She spun around, took 2 steps back, and grabbed Gent's arm. On second thought, come with me, she said, steering him through the chaos to a door-marked crypt opening off the sides of the war room. She keyed in her security code and the door slid open. It was a good-sized room crowded to the gills of computers, decrypt techs, and interface droids. Who's in charge here? Leia called as a couple of heads swung her direction. I am, a middle-aged man wearing a colonel's insignia said, taking a step back from one of the consoles into about the only bit of empty space in the room. I'm Counselor Organa Solo. Leia identified herself. This is Gent, an expert slicer. Can you use him? I don't know, the colonel said, throwing the kid a speculative look. Ever tackled an Imperial battle encrypt code, Gent? Nope, Gent said. Never seen one. I sliced a couple of their regular military encrypts though. Which ones? Gent's eyes went a little foggy. Well, there was one called the Lapido program. Oh, and there was something called the ILKO encrypt back when I was 12. That was a tough one. Took me almost 2 months to slice. Someone whistled softly. Is that good? Leia asked. The colonel snorted. I'd say so, yes. ILKO was one of the master encrypt codes the Empire used for data transfer between Coruscant and the original Death Star construction facility at Horrors. Took us nearly a month to crack it. He beckoned. Come on over, son. We've got a console for you right here. If you like ILKO, you're going to love battle encrypts. Gent's face lit up and he was picking his way between the other consoles as Leia slipped back into the war room. To find that the battle was underway. 6 Imperial Star Destroyers had come in from hyperspace through the center gap of the Interdictor group, splitting into 2 groups of 3 and heading for the 2 massive, mid-orbit Golan-free battle stations. Their TIE fighters were swarming ahead of them, heading toward the defenders now beginning to emerge from the low-orbit space dock facility and from Coruscant's surface. On the master visual display, occasional flashes of turbo laser fire flickered as both sides began to fire ranging shots. General Riken was standing a few steps back from the main command console when Leia reached him. Princess, he nodded gravely in greeting. General, she nodded back breathlessly, throwing a quick look across the console displays. Coruscant's energy shield was up, and the ground-based defenses were coming rapidly to full combat status, and a second wave of X-Wings and B-Wings were beginning to scramble from the space dock. And standing in front of the raised command chair, barking out orders to everyone in sight, was Admiral Drayson. Drayson, she demanded. Akbar's on an inspection tour of the Kataris region, Riken said grimly. That leaves Drayson in charge. Leia looked up at the Master Tactical, a sinking feeling settling firmly in her stomach. Drayson was competent enough, but against Grand Admiral Thrawn, competent wasn't good enough. Has the sector fleet been alerted? I think we got the word out to them before the shield went up, Riken said. Unfortunately, one of the first things the Imperials hit was the out-orbit relay station, so there's no way of knowing whether or not they heard, not without opening the shield. The sinking feeling sunk a little lower. Then this isn't just a feint to draw the sector fleet here, Leia said. Otherwise, they'd have left the relay station alone so we could keep calling for help. I agree, Riken said. Whatever Thrawn has in mind, we seem to be it. Leia nodded wordlessly, gazing up at the visual display. The Star Destroyers had entered the battle station's outer kill zones now, and the black of space was beginning to sparkle with more serious turbo laser fire. Outside the main fire field, dreadnoughts and other support ships were forming a perimeter to protect the Star Destroyers from the defenders rising toward them. On the Master Tactical, a flicker of pale white light shot upward, an ion cannon blast from the surface, streaking toward the Star Destroyers. Waste of power, Riken muttered contemptuously. They're way out of range. And even if they weren't, Leia knew, the electronics disrupting charge would have had as much chance of hitting the battle station as any of the Star Destroyers it had been aimed at. Ion cannon weren't exactly known for tight beam accuracy. We've got to get someone else in command here, she said, looking around the war room. If she could find Mon Mothma and persuade her to put Riken in charge. Abruptly her eyes stopped their sweep. There, standing against the back wall, gazing up at the Master Tactical, was Sena Lykevold Midanil, Chief Advisor to General Gambel Iblis, who was considerably more than merely competent. I'll be back, she told Riken, and headed off into the crowd. Counselor Organa Solo, Sena said as Leia reached her, a tautness straining her face and sense. I was told to stay back here out of the way. Can you tell me what's happening? What's happening is that we need Garm, Leia said, glancing around. Where is he? Observation gallery, Sena said, nodding upward toward the semicircular balcony running around the back of half of the war room. Leia looked up. Beings of all sorts were beginning to pour into the gallery. Government civilians, most of them who were authorized this deep into the command floor but weren't cleared for access to the war room proper. Sitting alone to one side, gazing intently at the master displays, was Beliblis. "Get him down here," Leia told Sena. "We need him." Sena seemed to sigh. "He won't come down," she said. "Not unless and until Mon Mothma asks him to." His own words. Leia felt her stomach tighten. Beliblis had more than his share of stiff-necked pride, but this is no time for personal squabbles. He can't do that. We need his help. Sena shook her head minutely. "I've tried. He won't listen to me." Leia took a deep breath. "Maybe he'll listen to me." "I hope so." Sena gestured toward the display, where one of Beliblis' dreadnoughts had appeared from the space dock to join the rising wave of starfighters, Corellian gunships, and escort frigates blazing toward the invaders. "That's the Harrier," she identified it. "My sons Peter and David are aboard it." Leia touched her shoulder. "Don't worry. I'll get him down here." The center section of the gallery was becoming almost crowded by the time she reached it, but the area around Beliblis was still reasonably empty. "Hello, Leia," he said as she came up to him. "I thought you'd be down below." "I should be, and so should you," Leia said. "We need you down. You have your comlink with you?" He cut her off sharply. She frowned at him. "Yes. Get it out. Now, call Drayson and warn him about those two interdictors." Leia looked at the Master Tactical. The two interdictor cruisers that had come in late to the party were doing some fine-tuned maneuvering, the hazy gravity wave cones sweeping across one of the battle stations. "Thrawn pulled this stunt on us at Cat Krystack," Beliblis went on. "He uses an interdictor cruiser to define a hyperspace edge, then brings a ship in along an intersecting vector to drop out at a precisely chosen point. Drayson needs to pull some ships up on those flanks to be ready for whatever Thrawn's bringing in." Leia was already digging in her robe pocket. "But we don't have anything here that can take on another Star Destroyer." "It's not a matter of taking it on," Beliblis told her. "Whatever's on its way will come in blind, with deflectors down and no targeting references. If our ships are in place, we'll get one solid free shot at them. That could make a lot of difference." "I understand," Leia said, thumbing on her comlink and keying for the central switching operator. "This is Counselor Leia Organa Solo. I have an urgent message for Admiral Drayson. Admiral Drayson is occupied and cannot be disturbed," the electronic voice said. "This is a direct council override," Leia ordered. "Put me through to Drayson." "Voice analysis confirmed," the operator said. "Council override is superseded by military emergency procedure. You may leave Admiral Drayson a message." Leia ground her teeth, throwing a quick glance at the tactical. "Then put me through to Drayson's chief aide. Lieutenant Dupre is occupied and cannot—" "Cancel," Leia cut it off. "Go me General Recan. General Recan is occupied. Too late," Beliblis said quietly. Leia looked up. Two Victory-class Star Destroyers had suddenly appeared out of hyperspace, dropping in at point-blank range to their target battle stations exactly as Beliblis had predicted. They delivered massive broadsides, then angled away before the station or its defending gunships could respond, with more than token return fire. On the tactical, the hazy blue shell indicating the station's deflector shield flickered wildly before settling down again. "Drayson's no match for him," Beliblis sighed. "He just isn't." Leia took a deep breath. "You have to come down, Garm." He shook his head. "I can't. Not until Mon Mothma asks me to." "You're behaving like a child," Leia snapped, abandoning any attempt to be diplomatic about this. "You can't let people die out there just because of personal pique." He looked at her, and as she glared back, she was struck by the pain in his eyes. "You don't understand, Leia," he said. "This has nothing to do with me. It has to do with Mon Mothma. After all these years, I finally understand why she does things the way she does. I've always assumed she was gathering more and more power to herself simply because she was in love with power. But I was wrong." "So why does she do it?" Leia demanded, not really interested in talking about Mon Mothma. "Because of everything she does there are lives hanging in the balance," he said quietly, "and she's terrified of trusting anyone else with those lives." Leia stared at him, but even as she opened her mouth to deny it, all the pieces of her life these past few years suddenly fell into place. All the diplomatic missions Mon Mothma had insisted she go on, no matter what the personal cost in lost Jedi training and strained family life, all the trust she'd invested in Akbar and a few others, all the responsibility that had been shifted onto fewer and fewer shoulders, onto the shoulders of those few she could trust to do the job right. "That's why I can't simply go down and take command," Beliblis said into the silence. "Till she's able to accept me, really accept me, someone she can trust, she will never be able to give me any genuine authority in the New Republic. She'll always need to be hovering around in the background somewhere, watching over my shoulder to make sure I don't make any mistakes. She hasn't got the time for that. I haven't got the patience, and the friction would be devastating for everyone caught in the middle." He nodded to the war room. "When she's ready to trust me, I'll be ready to serve. Until then, it's better for everyone involved if I stay out of it. Except for those dying out there," Leia reminded him tightly. Let me call her, Garm. Maybe I can persuade her to offer you command." Beliblis shook his head. "If you have to persuade her, Leia, it doesn't count. She has to decide this for herself." "Perhaps she has." Mon Mothma's voice came from behind them. Leia turned in surprise. With all her attention concentrated on Beliblis, she hadn't even noticed the older woman's approach. "Mon Mothma," she said, feeling the guilty awkwardness of having been caught talking about someone behind her back. Aye, it's all right, Leia, Mon said. General Beliblis. Beliblis had risen to his feet to face her. Yes? Mon seemed to brace herself. We've had more than our share of differences over the years, General, but that was a long time ago. We were a good team once. There's no reason why we can't be one again. She hesitated again. With a sudden flash of insight, Leia saw how incredibly difficult this was for her. How humiliating it was to face a man who'd once turned his back on her and to admit aloud that she needed his help. Beliblis was unwilling to bend until she'd said the words he wanted to hear. And then, to Leia's surprise, Beliblis straightened to a military attention. Mon Mothma, he said formally, given the current emergency, I hereby request your permission to take command of Coruscant's defense. The lines around Mon Mothma's eyes moved noticeably, a quiet relief colouring over her sense. I would be very grateful if you would do so, Garm. He smiled. Then let's get to it. Together they headed for the stairway down to the command floor. With a newly humbled sense of her own limitations, Leia realized that probably half of what she just witnessed had passed her by completely. The long and perilous history Mon Mothma and Beliblis had shared had created an empathy between them, a bond and understanding far deeper than Leia's Jedi insights could even begin to track through. Perhaps she decided it was that empathy that formed the true underlying strength of the New Republic, the strength that would create the future of the galaxy, if it could withstand the next few hours. Clenching her teeth, she hurried after them. A pair of Corellian gunships shot past the Chimera, sending a volley of turbo-laser fire spattering across the bridge deflector shield. A squadron of TIE fighters was right on their tail, sweeping into a relish flanking maneuver as they tried for a clear shot. Beyond them, Palaon spotted an escort frigate cutting into backup position across the gunship's exit vector. Squadron A4, move to Sector 22, Palaon ordered. So far, as near he could tell, the battle seemed to be going well. There they go, Thrawn commented from beside him. Palaon scanned the area. Where? He asked. They're preparing to pull back, Thrawn told him, pointing to one of the two rebel dreadnoughts that had joined the battle. Observe how that dreadnought is moving into cover position for a retreat. There, the second one is following suit. Palaon frowned at the manoeuvring dreadnoughts. He still didn't see it, but he'd never yet seen Thrawn was wrong on such a call. They're abandoning the battle stations? Thrawn snorted gently. They never should have brought those ships out to defend them in the first place. Golan defense platforms can take considerably more punishment than their former guard commander apparently realized. Their former guard commander? Yes, Thrawn said. At a guess, I'd say our old Corellian adversary has just been put in command of Coruscant's defense. I wonder what took them so long. Palaon shrugged, studying the battle area. The Grand Admiral was right. The defenders were starting to pull back. Perhaps they had to wake him up. Perhaps. Thrawn sent a leisurely look around the battle area. You see how the Corellian offers us a choice. Stay here and duel with the battle stations or follow the defenders down into range of the ground-based weaponry. Fortunately, his eyes glittered. We have a third option. Palaon nodded. He'd been wondering when Thrawn would unveil his brilliant new siege weapon. Yes, sir, he said. Shall I order the tractor launching? We'll wait for the Corellian to pull his ships back a bit further, Thrawn said. We wouldn't want him to miss this. Understood, Palaon said. Stepping back to his command chair, he sat down and confirmed that the asteroids in the hangar bay tractor beams were ready, and waited for the Grand Admiral's order. All right, Beliblis said. Harrier, begin pulling back. Cover those escort frigates on your port side flank. Red Leader, watch out for those TIE interceptors. Leia watched the tactical display, holding her breath. Yes, it was going to work. Unwilling to risk the ground-based weaponry, the Imperials were letting the defenders retreat back toward Coruscant. That left only the two battle stations still in danger, and they were proving themselves more capable of absorbing damage than Leia had realized they could. And even that would be ending soon. The Grand Admiral would know better than to be here when the sector fleet arrived. It was almost over, and they'd gotten through it. General Beliblis, an officer at one of the monitor stations, spoke up. We're getting a funny reading from the Chimera's hangar bay. What is it? Beliblis asked, stepping over to the console. It reads like the launching tractor beams being activated, the officer said, indicating one of the multicolored spots in the Star Destroyer's silhouette centered in his display. But it's pulling far too much power. Could they be launching a whole TIE squadron together? Leia suggested. I don't think so, the officer said. That's the other thing. Near as we can tell, nothing at all left the bay. Beside Leia, Beliblis stiffened. Calculate the exit vector, he ordered. All ships sensor focus along that path for drive emissions. I think the Chimera's just launched a cloaked ship. Someone nearby swore feelingly. Leia looked up at the master visual display, her throat suddenly tight as the memory of that brief conversation she and Han had had with Admiral Akbar flashed back to mind. Akbar had been solidly convinced, and had convinced her, that the double-blind properties of the cloaking shield made it too user-dangerous to be an effective weapon. If Thrawn had found a way around that problem. They're firing again, the sense officer reported. And again. Same from the Death's Head, another officer put in. Firing again. Signal the battle stations to track and fire along those vectors, Belly Bliss ordered. As close to the Star Destroyers as possible. We've got to find out what Thrawn's up to. The word was barely out of his mouth when there was a flash of light from the visual display. One of the escort frigates along the first projected vector was suddenly ablaze, its aft section trailing fiery drive gases as the whole ship spun wildly about its transverse axis. Collision, someone embarked. Escort frigate Evanru. Impact of unknown object. Impact? Belly Bliss echoed. Not a turbo laser shot? Telemetry indicates physical impact. The other shook his head. Leia looked back at the visual, where the Evanru was now reefed in burning gas as it fought to get its spin under control. Cloaking shields are supposed to be double-blind, Leia said. How are they maneuvering? Maybe they're not, Belly Bliss said, his voice dark with suspicion. Tactical, give me a new track from point of impact of the Evanru. Assume inert object. Calculate impact velocity by distance to the Chimera, and don't forget to factor in the local gravitational field. Feed probable location to the Harrier. Order it to open fire as soon as it has the coordinates. Yes, sir, one of the lieutenants spoke up. Feeding to the Harrier now. On second thought, belay that last, Belly Bliss said, holding up a hand. Order the Harrier to use its ion cannon only. Repeat, ion cannon only. No turbo lasers. Leia frowned at him. You're trying to take the ship intact? If I'm trying to take it intact, yes, Belly Bliss said slowly, but I don't think it's a ship. He fell silent. On the visual, the Harrier's ion cannon began to fire. The dreadnought opened fire, as indeed Thrawn had predicted it would, but only Palaon noted with some surprise with its ion cannon. Admiral? Yes, I see, Thrawn said. Interesting. I was right, Captain. Our old Corellian adversary is indeed in command below, but he's allowed us to lead him by the nose only so far. Palaon nodded as understanding suddenly came. He's trying to knock out the asteroid's cloaking shield, hoping to take it intact. Thrawn touched his control board. Forward turbo laser batteries. Track and target asteroid number 1. Fire on my command only. Palaon looked down at his magnified visual display. The dreadnought had found its target, its ion beams vanishing in mid-space as they flooded down into the cloaking shield. It wouldn't be able to take much more of that. Abruptly, the stars in that empty region vanished. For a couple of heartbeats, there was complete blackness as the cloaking shield collapsed in on itself. Then, just as abruptly, the newly uncloaked asteroid was visible. The ion beams cut off. Turbo lasers, stand by, Thrawn said. We want them to have a good look first. Turbo lasers, fire. Palaon shifted his attention to the viewport. The green fire lanced out, disappearing into the distance as they converged on their target. A second later, there was a faint flash from that direction, a flash that was repeated more strongly from this visual display. Another salvo, another, and another. Ceasefire, Thrawn said with clear satisfaction. They're welcome to whatever's left. Hangar Bay, firing status. We're up to 72, sir, the engineering officer reported, his voice sounding a little strained, but the power feedback shunts starting to glow white. We can't keep up these drive findings much longer without burning out either the shunt or the tractor projector itself. Close down dry firing, Thrawn ordered, and signal the other ships to do likewise. How many total firings have there been, Captain? Palaon checked the figures. 287, he told the Grand Admiral. I presume all 22 actual asteroids are out. Yes, sir, Palaon confirmed. Most of them in the first 2 minutes, but there's no way of knowing if they've taken up their prescribed orbits. The specific orbits are irrelevant, Thrawn assured him. All that matters is that the asteroids are somewhere in the space around Coruscant. Palaon smiled. Yes, they were, except that there were only a fraction of the number the rebels thought there were. And now we leave, sir? Now we leave, Thrawn confirmed. For the moment, at least, Coruscant is effectively out of the war. Drayson nodded to the battle ops colonel and stepped back to the small group waiting for him, a short distance behind the consoles. The final numbers are in, he said, his voice sounding a little hollow. They can't be absolutely certain they didn't miss any through the battle debris, but even so, their count is 287. 287, General Regan repeated, his jaw dropping slightly. That's the number, Drayson nodded, turning his glare on Belly Bliss, as if Leia thought all this was somehow Belly Bliss's fault. What now? Belly Bliss was rubbing his cheek thoughtfully. For starters, I don't think the situation is quite as bad as it looks, he said. From everything I've heard about how expensive cloaking shields are, I can't see Thrawn squandering the kind of resources 300 of them would take, especially when a much smaller number would do the job just as well. You think the other tractor beam firings are faked? Leia asked. They couldn't have been, Regan objected. I was watching the sensor board. Those projectors were definitely drawing power. Belly Bliss looked at Drayson. You know more about Star Destroyers than the rest of us, Admiral. Is it possible? Drayson frowned off into the distance, professional pride momentarily eclipsing his personal animosity toward Belly Bliss. It could be done, he agreed at last. You could run a feedback shunt from the tractor beam projector, either to a flash capacitor or a power dissipator somewhere else on the ship. That would let you run a sizable surge of power through the projector without it really doing anything. Is there any way to tell the difference between that and an actual asteroid launch? Mon Mothma asked. From this distance? Drayson shook his head. No. It almost doesn't matter how many are up there, Riken said. Eventually their orbits will decay, and letting even one hit ground would be a disaster. Until we've cleared them out, we can't risk lowering the planetary shield. The problem being how we locate them, Drayson agreed heavily, and how we know when we've gotten them all. A movement caught Leia's eye, and she looked over as a tight-faced Colonel Bremen joined them. Again, it could be worse, Beliblis pointed out. The sector fleet can have the out-orbit relay station replaced in a few hours, so at least you'll still be able to direct the New Republic's defense from here. It'll also make it easier to transmit an all-worlds alert. Bremen spoke up. Mara Jade's escaped. Mon Mothma inhaled sharply. How? She asked. With help, Bremen said grimly. The guard droid was deactivated. Some kind of jury-rigged restraining bolt. It erased that section of memory, too. How long ago? Riken asked. No more than a few hours. Bremen glanced around the war room. We've had extra security on the command floor since the break was discovered, thinking they might have been planning some sabotage to coincide with the Imperials' attack. That could still be the plan, Beliblis said. Have you sealed off the palace? Like a smuggler's profit box, Bremen said. I doubt they're still here, though. We'll need to make certain of that, Mon Mothma said. I want you to organize a complete search of the palace, Colonel. Bremen nodded. Right away. Leia braced herself. They weren't going to be happy about this. Don't bother, Colonel, she said, touching Bremen's arm to stop him as he turned to leave. Mara's not here. They all looked at her. How do you know? Beliblis asked. Because she left Coruscant earlier tonight, along with Han and Luke. There was a long silence. I wondered why Solo wouldn't come to the war room with you, Beliblis said. You want to tell us what's going on? Leia hesitated, but surely none of these people could possibly have anything to do with the Delta Source security leak. Mara thinks she knows where the Empire's cloning facility might be. We thought it would be worth sending her and a small team to check it out. We thought? Drayson snapped. Who is this we? Leia looked him straight in the eye. My family and closest friends, she said. The only people I can be absolutely certain aren't leaking information to the Empire. That is a gross insult. Enough, Admiral. Mon Mothma cut him off calmly, but there was a hardness around her eyes. Whatever reprimands may be due here can wait until later. Whether it was prudent or otherwise, the fact remains that they're on their way and we need to decide how best to help them. Leia? The most important thing to do is pretend Mara's still here, Leia said, the tightness in her chest easing slightly. She told me she'd only been to Wayland once, and she couldn't guess how long it would take her to reconstruct the route. The longer lead they have, the less time the Empire will have to rush reinforcements there. What happens then? Mon Mothma asked, assuming that they will find it. They'll try to destroy it. There was a moment of silence. By themselves, Drayson said. Unless you have a spare fleet to lend them, yes, Leia said. Mon Mothma shook her head. You shouldn't have done it, Leia, she said. Not without consulting the Council. If I'd brought it to the Council, Mara might be dead now, Leia said bluntly. If news leaked at the Empire that she could find Wayland, the next commando team they sent wouldn't stop at just trying to discredit her. The Council is above suspicion, Mon Mothma said, her voice turning chilly. Are all the Council members aides? Leia countered. All the tactical people and supply officers and library researchers? If I'd suggested an attack on Wayland to the Council, all of those people would eventually have known about it. And more, Beliblis nodded. She has a point, Mon Mothma. I'm not interested in laying blame, Garm, Mon Mothma said quietly, nor in defending anyone's little niche of power. I'm concerned about the possibility that all this was indeed a setup. Leia, and that it will cost your husband and brother their lives. Leia swallowed hard. We thought about that too, she said, but we decided it was worth the risk, and there was no one else to do it. For a long minute no one said anything. Then Mon Mothma stirred. You'll need to talk to everyone who knows Mara Jade is gone, Colonel, she said to Bremen. If and when we obtain Wayland's location, we'll see what we can do about sending reinforcements to help them, provided we can be sure it isn't a trap, Drayson added, glowering. Of course, Mon Mothma agreed, avoiding Leia's eyes. For now, that's all we can do. Let's concentrate on Coruscant's immediate problems, defense, and finding those cloaked asteroids. General Beliblis, a tentative hand touched Leia's shoulder, and she turned to find the slice again standing there. It's all over? He muttered to her. The battle is, yes, she said, glancing at Mon Mothma and the others. They were already knee-deep into a discussion about the asteroids, but eventually one of them was bound to notice Ghent and realize he wasn't supposed to be here. Come on, she told him, steering him back toward the war room exit. I'll tell you all about it outside. What did you think of Imperial battle encrypt codes? Oh, they're okay, he said. The guys in there didn't let me do all that much, really. I didn't know their machines as well as they did. They had kind of a silly drill going on, too. Leia smiled. The best and smoothest decrypting routine the New Republic experts had come up with, and Gen considered it a silly drill. People get into routines on the way they do things, she said diplomatically. Maybe I can arrange for you to talk to the person in overall charge and offer some suggestions. Gent waved a vague hand. "No, military types wouldn't like the way I do things. Even Card gets bent out by it sometimes. By the way, you know that pulse transmitter you've got going somewhere nearby? The one Delta Source has been using?" Leia nodded. "Counterintelligence has been trying to locate it since it started transmitting, but it's some sort of cross-frequency split phase something or other, and they haven't had any luck." "Oh," Ken seemed to digest that. "Well, that's a tech problem. I don't know anything about those." "That's all right," Leia assured him. "I'm sure you'll find other ways to help." "Yeah," he said, digging a data card from his pocket. "Anyway, here." She frowned as she took the card. "What's this?" "It's the encrypt code from the pulse transmitter." Leia stopped short. "It's what?" He stopped too, turning innocent eyes on her. "The encrypt code that cross-frequency Watsis is using. I finally got it sliced." She stared at him. "Just like that? You just went ahead and sliced it?" He shrugged again. "Well, sort of. I've been working on it for a month, you know." Leia gazed at the data card in her hand, a strange and not entirely pleasant thrill of excitement tingling through her. "Does anyone know you have this?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "I thought about giving it to that colonel in there before I left, but he was busy talking to someone. Delta Source's encrypt code. And Delta Source didn't know they had it." "Don't tell anyone else," she said. "And I mean anyone." Gent frowned but shrugged. "Okay, whatever you say." "Thank you," Leia murmured, sliding the data card into her robe pocket. It was the key to Delta Source. Deep within her, she knew that. All she needed was to find the right way to use it. And to find it fast. The fortress of Hijana had been crumbling slowly away for perhaps 1,000 years before the 5th Alderaanian expedition had spotted it, keeping its silent, deserted vigil over its silent, deserted world. A vast expanse of incredibly hard black stone, it stood on a high bluff overlooking a plain that still bore the deep scars of massive destruction. To some, the enigmatic fortress was a tragic monument, a last-ditch attempt at defense by a desperate world under siege. To others, it was the brooding and malicious cause of both that siege and the devastation that had followed. To Card, for the moment at least, it was home. "You sure know how to pick 'em, Card," Gillespie commented, propping his feet up on the edge of the auxiliary comm desk and looking around. "How did you find this place, anyway?" "It's all right there in the old records," Carl told him, watching his display as the decrypt program ran its course. A star map appeared, accompanied by a very short text. Gillespie nodded toward Card's display. "Klingon's report?" "Yes," Card said, pulling out the data card. "Such as it is." "Nothing, right?" "Pretty much. No indications of clone traffic anywhere on Podarus, Chazwa, or Joyol." Gillespie dropped his feet off the table and stood up. "Well, that's that, then," he said, stepping over to the fruit rack someone had laid out on a side table and picking himself out a dribless fruit. "Looks like whatever the Empire had going on in Aura Sector has dried up. If there was anything going there in the first place." "Given the lack of a trail, I suspect the latter," Card agreed, choosing one of the cards that had come from his contact on Bespin and sliding it into the display. "Still, it was something we needed to know, one way or the other. Among other things, it frees us up to concentrate on other possibilities." "Yeah," Gillespie said, reluctantly as he went back to his seat. "Well, you know, Card, this whole thing has been kind of strange. Smugglers, I mean, doing this kind of snoop work. Hasn't paid very much either. I've already told you we'll be getting some reimbursement from the New Republic, so that we don't have anything to sell them," Gillespie pointed out. "Never known anyone yet who paid for no delivery." Card frowned over at him. Gillespie had produced a wicked-looking knife from somewhere and was carefully carving a slice from the dribless fruit. "This isn't about getting paid," he reminded the other. "It's about surviving against the Empire." "Maybe for you it is," Gillespie said, studying the slice of fruit a moment before taking a bite. "You've got enough sidelines going that you can afford to lay off business for a while, but see, the rest of us have payrolls to meet and ships to keep fueled. The money stops coming in, our employees start getting nasty. Soon you and the others want money." He could see Gillespie brace himself. "I want money. The others want out." It was not, in retrospect, exactly an unexpected development. The white-hot anger toward the Empire that had been sparked by that attack at the Whistler's Whirlpool was cooling, and the habits of day-to-day business were beginning to reassert themselves. "The Empire is still dangerous," he said. "Not to us," Gillespie said bluntly. "There hasn't been a single blip of Imperial attention directed toward us since the Whirlpool. They didn't mind us poking around Aura Sector. They didn't even come down on Mazik for that thing at the Bilbringi shipyards, so they're ignoring us, despite provocation to do otherwise. Does that make you feel safe?" Carefully, Gillespie sliced himself off another piece of fruit. "I don't know," he conceded. "Half the time I think Brask's right, that if we can leave the Empire alone, it'll leave us alone. But I can't help thinking about that army of clones Thrawn chased me off Yukio with. I start thinking that maybe he's just too busy with the New Republic to bother with us right now." Card shook his head. "Thrawn's never too busy to chase someone down if he wants them," he said. "If he's ignoring us, it's because he knows that's the best way to quiet any opposition. Next step will probably be to offer us transport contracts and pretend that we're all good friends again." Gillespie looked at him sharply. "You've been talking to Pata?" "No." Why? She told me 2 days ago that she's been offered a contract to bring a bunch of sublight engines to the Imperial shipyards at Ord-Tracy. Card grimaced. Has she accepted? Said she was still working out the details, but you know Pata. She's always running right on the edge. Probably can't afford to say no. Card turned back to his display, the sour taste of defeat in his mouth. I suppose I can't really blame her, he said. What about the others? Gillespie shrugged uncomfortably. Like I said, the money keeps going out. We have to have money coming in too. And just like that, the reluctant coalition he tried to put together was falling apart, and the Empire hadn't had to fire a single shot to do it. But I suppose I'll just have to go it alone, he said, standing up. Thank you for your assistance. I'm sure you want to be getting back to your business. Now, don't get all huffy, Card, Gillespie chided him, taking one last bite of fruit and getting to his feet. You're right, this clone stuff is serious business. If you want to hire my ships and people for your hunt, we'll be happy to help you out. We just can't afford to do it for free anymore, that's all. Just let us know. He turned toward the door. Just a minute, Card called after him. A rather audacious thought had just occurred to him. Suppose I find a way to guarantee funding for everyone. You think the others would stay aboard too? Gillespie eyed him suspiciously. Don't con me, Card. You don't have that kind of money lying around. No, but the New Republic does. Under the current situation, I don't think they'd be adverse to having a few more fighting ships on the payroll. Gillespie shook his head firmly. Sorry, but a privateer is a little out of my line. Even if your duty consists entirely of collecting information? Card asked. I'm not talking about anything more than what you just doing in Aura Sector. Sounds like a dream assignment, Gillespie said sardonically, except for the tiny little problem of finding someone in the New Republic stupid enough to pay privateer rates for snoop duty. Card smiled. Actually, I wasn't planning to waste their valuable time telling them about it. Have you ever met my associate Ghent? For a moment, Gillespie just stared at him, looking puzzled. Then abruptly, he got it. You wouldn't. Why not? Card countered. On the contrary, we'd be doing them a service. Why clutter their lives with these troublesome accounting details while they're trying to survive a war? And since they'd have to pay anyway once we found the clone center for them. Exactly, Card nodded. We can consider this merely a prepayment for work about to be rendered. Just as well they won't know about it until it's over, Gillespie said dryly. Question is, can Ghent pull it off? Easily, Card assured him, particularly since he's inside the Imperial Palace on Coruscant at the moment. I was planning to head that way soon to pick up Mara anyway. I'll simply have him slice into some sector fleet's records and write us in. Gillespie exhaled noisily. It's got possibilities, I'll give it that much. Don't know if it'll be enough to get the others back on board, though. Then we'll just have to ask them, Card said, stepping back to his desk. Invitations for, say, 4 days from now? Gillespie shrugged. Give it a try. What have you got to lose? Card sobered. But if Grand Admiral Thrawn, he reminded the other, that's not a question to ever ask lightly. The evening breezes moved through the crumbling walls and stone columns of the ruined fortress, occasionally whistling softly as it found its way through a small hole or crevice. Sitting with his back to one of the pillars, Card sipped at his cup and watched the last sliver of the sun disappear below the horizon. On the plain below, the long shadows stretching across the scarred ground were beginning to fade as the coming darkness of night began its inexorable move across the landscape. All in all, rather symbolic of the way this galactic war had finally caught up with Card himself. He took another sip from his cup, marvelling once again at this whole absurd situation. Here he was, an intelligent, calculating, appropriately selfish smuggler who made a successful career out of keeping his distance from galactic politics. A smuggler, moreover, who'd sworn explicitly to keep his people out of this particular war, and yet somehow here he was, squarely in the middle of it. And not only in the middle of it, but trying his best to drag other smugglers in after him. He shook his head in vague annoyance. This exact same thing, he knew, had happened to Han Solo sometime around the big Yavin battle. He could remember being highly amused by Solo's gradual entanglement in the Rebel Alliance's nets of duty and responsibility. Looking at it from the inside of the net, the whole thing wasn't nearly so entertaining. From across the battered courtyard came the faint sound of crunching gravel. Card turned to look at the line of stone pillars in that direction, his hand dropping to his blaster. No one else was supposed to be here at the moment. Sturm? He called softly. Drang? The familiar cackling/purr came in response, and Card let out a quiet sigh of relief. Over here, he called to the animal. Come on, over here. The order was unnecessary. The Vornskir were already loping around the pillars toward him, its muzzle low to the ground, the stub of its truncated whip tail wagging madly behind him. Probably Drang, Card decided. He was the more sociable of the two, and Sturm had a tendency to dawdle over his meals. The Vornskir skidded to a halt beside him, giving another of his strange cackles/purrs, a rather mournful one this time, as he pressed his muzzle up to Card's outstretched palm. It was Drang, all right. Yes, it's very quiet, Card told him, running his hand back up across the animal's face and around to scratch at the sensitive skin behind his ears. But the others will be back soon. They've just gone to check out the other ships. Drang gave another mournful cackle/purr, and dropped into a half-crouch beside Card's chair, staring alertly out over the empty plain below. But whatever he was looking for, he didn't find it, and after a moment he growled deep in his throat and lowered his muzzle to rest on the stone. His ears twitched once as if straining to hear a sound that wasn't there, and then they too folded back down. "It's quiet down there, too," Card agreed soberly, stroking the Vornski's fur. "What do you suppose happened here?" Drang didn't answer. Card gazed down at the Vornski's lean, muscled back, wondering yet again about these strange predators he'd so casually, perhaps even arrogantly, decided to make pets of. Wondering if he'd have thought twice about doing so if he'd realized that he was dealing with possibly the only animals in the galaxy who hunted via the Force. It was a preposterous conclusion, on the face of it. Force sensitivity itself wasn't unheard of, certainly. The goat owl had a fairly useless form of it, and there were persistent rumors about the Dun Nuoguin as well, to name just two, but all those who had such sensitivity were sentient creatures of the high levels of intelligence and self-awareness that implied. For non-sentient animals to use the Force this way was something new, but it was a conclusion that the events of the past few months had forced him to. They had been his pet's unexpected reaction to Luke Skywalker at Card's Mirka base. There had been the similar and, again, previously unseen reaction to Mara aboard the Wild Card, just before the hunch she'd had that had saved them from that Imperial interdictor cruiser. There had been the far more vicious reaction of the wild Vornskirs toward both Mara and Skywalker during their 3-day trek through the Mirka forests. Skywalker was a Jedi. Mara had shown some decidedly Jedi-like talents, and perhaps even more telling, the existence of the bizarre force-empty bubbles created by Mirka's Salamiri could finally be explained if they were simply a form of defense or camouflage against predators. Abruptly, Drang's head snapped up, his ears stiffening as he twisted halfway around. Card strained his ears, and a few seconds later he heard the faint sounds of the returning shuttle. "It's all right," he assured the Vornskir. "It's just Chin and the others, back from the ship." Drang held the pose a moment longer. Then, as if deciding to take Card's word for it, he turned and laid his head back down again, looking out over a plain that, if Card's suspicion was right, was more silent even for him than it was for Card. "Don't worry," he soothed the animal, scratching again behind his ears. "We'll be out of here soon, and I promise for the next place we go we'll have plenty of other life around for you to listen to." The Vornskir's ears twitched, but that might have been just the scratching. Taking one last look at the fading colours of sunset, Card stood up, resettling his gun belt across his hips. There was no particular reason to go in yet, of course. The invitations had been written, encrypted, and transmitted, and for now there was nothing to do except wait for the replies. But suddenly it felt lonely out here, much lonelier than it had a few minutes ago. "Come on, Drang," he said, reaching down for one last pat. "Time to go in." The shuttle settled to the floor of the Chimera's hangar bay, release valves hissing over the heads of the stormtroopers moving purposefully into escort position around the lowering ramp. Plan stayed where he was beside Thrawn, grimacing at the smell of the skid gases and wishing he knew what in the Empire the Grand Admiral was up to this time. Whatever it was, he had a bad feeling that he wasn't going to like it. Thrawn could talk all he liked about how predictable these smugglers were. Maybe to him they were, but Plan had had his own share of dealings with this sort of fringe scum, and he'd never yet seen a deal that hadn't gone sour one way or the other. None of those deals had started from the sheer audacity of an attack on an Imperial shipyard. The ramp finished its descent and locked in place. The stormtrooper commander peered up into the shuttle and nodded, and flanked by 2 black-clad fleet troopers, the prisoner descended to the deck. "Ah, Captain Mazik," Thrawn said smoothly as the stormtroopers fell into escort positions around him. "Welcome to the Chimera. I apologize for this rather theatrical summons and any problems it may have created in your business scheduling, but there are certain matters that cannot be discussed other than face-to-face." "You're very funny," Mazik snarled, a masked contrast, Palaeon thought, to the suave, sophisticated ladies' man that had been profiled in Intelligence's files. But then the knowledge that one was facing an Imperial interrogation was enough to strip the civilized polish from any man. "How did you find me?" "Calm now, Captain," Thrawn admonished him calmly. "Did you seriously think you could hide from me if I wanted you found?" "Card managed it," Mazik shot back, trying hard to put up a good front, but the manacled hands are working nervously at each other. "You still haven't got him, have you?" "Card's time will come," Thrawn told him, his voice still calm but noticeably cooler. "But we're not talking about Card. We're talking about you." "Yes, and I'm sure you're looking forward to it," Mazik growled, waving his manacled hands. "Let's get it over with." Thrawn's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You misunderstand, Captain. You're not here for punishment. You're here because I wanted to clear the air between us." Mazik paused in mid-bluster. "What are you talking about?" he asked suspiciously. "I'm talking about the recent incident at the Bilbringi shipyards," Thrawn said. "No, don't deny it. I know it was you and Elor who destroyed that unfinished Star Destroyer, and normally the Empire would exact an extremely high price for such an act." However, under these particular circumstances, I am prepared to let it go. Mazik stared at him. I don't understand. It's very simple, Captain. Thrawn gestured, and one of Mazik's escort began removing his restraints. Your attack on Bilbringi was in revenge for a similar attack against a smugglers' meeting you attended on Trogan. All well and good, except that neither I nor any other senior Imperial officer authorized that attack. In fact, the garrison commander had explicit orders to leave your meeting alone. Mazik snorted. You expect me to believe that? Thrawn's eyes glittered. Would you rather believe I was so incompetent that I allowed an inadequate field force to be sent on a mission? He bit out. Mazik eyed him, still hostile but starting to look a little thoughtful as well. I always thought we got away too easily, he muttered. Then we understand each other, Thrawn said, his voice calm again, and the matter is settled. The shuttle has orders to take you back to your base. He smiled faintly, or rather to the backup base your ship and crew will have fled to by now on Lelmara. Again, my apologies for the inconvenience. Mazik's eyes darted around the hangar bay, his expression halfway between suspicion that this was a trick and an almost painfully eager hope that it wasn't. And I'm just supposed to believe you? He demanded. You're welcome to believe anything you wish, Thrawn said, but remember that I had you in my hand, and that I let you go. Good day, Captain. He started to turn away. So who were they? Mazik called after him. They weren't Imperial troops, I mean. Thrawn turned back to face him. They were indeed Imperial troops, he said. Our inquiries are still incomplete, but at the moment it appears that Lieutenant Kosk and his men were attempting to make a little extra money on the side. Mazik stared. Someone hired them to hit us? Imperial troops? Even Imperial troops are not always immune to the lure of bribery, Thrawn said, his voice dark with an excellent imitation of bitter contempt. In this case, they paid for their treason with their lives. Be assured that the person or persons responsible will pay a similar price. You know who it was? Mazik demanded. I believe I know, Thrawn said. As yet, I have no proof. Give me a hint. Thrawn smiled sardonically. Form your own hints, Captain. Good day. He turned and strode back to the archway leading to the service and prep areas. Pelan waited long enough to watch Mazik and his escort turn and start back up into the shuttle, then hurried to join him. Do you think you gave him enough, Admiral? He asked quietly. It won't matter, Captain, Thrawn assured him. We've given him all that's necessary, and if Mazik himself isn't clever enough to finger card, one of the other smuggler chiefs will be. In any case, it's always better to offer too little rather than too much. Some people automatically distrust free information. Behind them, the shuttle lifted from the deck and swung back around into space, and from the archway ahead a grinning figure emerged. Nicely done, Admiral, Niles Ferrier said, shifting his cigar to the other side of his mouth. You got him all squirmy and then tossed him back. He'll be thinking about that for a long time. Thank you, Ferrier, Thrawn said dryly. Your approval means so very much to me. For a second the ship thief's grin seemed to slip. Then apparently he decided to take the comment at face value. Okay, he said. So what's our next move? Thrawn's eyes flashed at the hour, but he let it go. Card sent out a series of transmissions last night, one of which we intercepted, he said. We're still decrypting it, but it can only be a call for another meeting. Once we have the location and time, they'll be provided to you. And I'll go and help Mazik finger Card, Ferrier nodded. You'll do nothing of the sort, Thrawn said sharply. You will sit in a corner and keep your mouth shut. Ferrier seemed to shrink back. Okay? Sure. Thrawn held his gaze another moment. What you will do, he continued at last, is to make certain that a certain data card is placed into Card's possession, preferably in the office aboard his ship. That will be where Mazik will probably look first. He motioned, and an officer stepped forward and handed Ferrier a data card. Ah, Ferrier said slightly as he took it. Yeah, I get it. The record of Card's deal with this Lieutenant Kosk, huh? Correct, Thrawn said. That, plus the supporting evidence you've already inserted into Kosk's own personal records, should leave no doubt that Card has been manipulating the other smugglers. I expect that to be more than adequate. Yeah, they're a pretty nasty bunch, all right. Ferrier turned the data card over in his hand, chewing on his cigar. Okay, so all I gotta do is get aboard the wild card. He broke off at the look from Thrawn's face. No, the Grand Admiral said quietly. On the contrary, you'll stay as far away from his ship and private ground facilities as possible. In fact, you will never allow yourself to be alone while you're at his base. Ferrier blinked in surprise. Yeah, but... Hopelessly, he held up the data card. Beside him, Peleon felt Thrawn's sigh of strained patience. Your Deffer will be the one to plant the data card aboard the wild card. Ferrier's face cleared. Oh yeah. Yeah. He can probably slip in and out without anyone even noticing. He had better, Thrawn warned, and suddenly his voice was icy cold. Because I haven't forgotten your role in the deaths of Lieutenant Kosk and his men. You owe the Empire, Ferrier, and that debt will be paid. Behind his beard, Ferrier's face had gone a little pale. I got it, Admiral. Good, Thrawn said. You'll remain on your ship until Decrypt obtains the location of Card's meeting for you. After that, you'll be on your own. Sure, Ferrier said, stuffing the data card into his tunic. So, after they take care of Card, what do? You'll be free to go about your business, Thrawn said. When I want you again, I'll let you know. Ferrier's lip twitched. Sure, he repeated. And on his face, Palayan saw that he was slowly starting to realize just how deep his debt to the Empire really was.